Motion is carried. Conflict of interest disclosure, if any? There being none, we'll move on to presentations. I'll turn it over to Brett, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I guess we all have had a chance to take a look at the agenda. We know what we're here for. It's presentations on two of our new mandated services as part of local government reform. Probably the two, well, easily the two most significant is monetarily to us. I believe combined, I would estimate they would represent approximately 75% of the total cost. So fairly significant. This evening we have Larry Shaw and David Seabrook with us. Larry will be presenting first. He's with Ignite Fredericton, and Dave will present second, following questions for Larry, and Dave's with Fredericton Tourism. With that, I would ask Maurice if you have anything to add before we get into the presentations.
No, I don't at this time. I guess we can just proceed. I think Larry, President and CEO of Ignite, is going first. The intention is to have probably a 15-minute or so presentation from each individual. Following Larry's presentation, we'll take time for questions directed at Larry. David will follow with a 15-minute presentation, questions to him, and then we'll ask them to leave and we can have a more detailed discussion amongst ourselves. So with that, Larry, floor is yours.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to meet. I think I know everybody, but if not, as Maurice mentioned, my name is Larry Shaw. I'm CEO of Ignite Fredericton, and Ignite Fredericton represents both Planet Hatch and Knowledge Park as well. So I believe everybody has seen the presentation. I'm just going to share my screen. Excuse me, share my screen. Once I do that, Maurice, if you could just confirm you're seeing it, because I will lose the picture of everybody on my screen.
Okay.
And then what I intend to do is I recognize that everybody has seen the presentation, so I'm going to go through what I think is some of the more important parts for consideration and data points that I think is important for the conversation. So give me 1 second, and hopefully all this will work well. You should be able to see the screen now.
It's about to come on.
Yep.
We can see it now. Thanks, Larry. Go ahead, Larry.
Awesome. Well, and please interrupt me or get my attention. As I said, I can't see the screen when I'm presenting here, but I'm going to go through this as quickly as I can and dedicate enough time for questions. So as I mentioned, this presentation has been shared with the board. It's been shared with the advisory group as well. So certainly I'm trying to reflect some of the early comments and feedback that we've had. I think it's also important to recognize that this presentation and any presentation coming from Ignite really has a lens of economic development. You know, I know there's a lot going on. Local government reform has a lot of tentacles and a lot of issues and a lot of opportunity that we have to work through. But at the same time, from an economic development perspective, I'm going to try to keep my comments directly to the opportunities that regionalization create for us. And in that, I think it's also important to know that from an economic development perspective, the merits of the business case for economic development should stand on their own, regardless of government, regardless of issues that may be happening at any particular time. If the merits stood a good business case, then they should continue. And policy really is what enables and moves economic development forward. So again, just the context of what I'm going to be going through over the next little while. And I'm trying to get my screen to change. So a couple of data grounding points that might want to share. You know, it really is. It's important to understand that we're not on an island. We're not isolated by ourselves. There's an awful lot of impacting things that are affecting our region, economic development in particular. But one of the most critical items that we work with and that we have to be very aware of on a day-to-day basis is what I describe the war on talent. Right now, I'm not sure of any industry, any sector, any component within the region, or quite frankly, you know, Atlantic Canada, that we are not struggling with population growth and workforce development, particularly as it relates to the economic development files. The other thing that I think is really important to understand when we talk about economic development, back to this analogy that we're not on an island by ourselves, is the fact that the markets now are global. You know, if you're a retailer, you only know too well what Amazon is doing in your back dooryard. That also, you know, is a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. There's new and creative ways to get to market. So the opportunity that gets created by technology is really one of the more thoughtful in, you know, sort of strategies that need to be deployed at any regional level. And then finally, as I mentioned before, you know, we're sensitive to and aligned to and cognizant of municipal reform. But this lens and the lens that Ignite really brings to the table is one of economic development and the merits of that. So the business cases for growth and opportunity is really important in anything that we do. A question that a lot of people may have is why region? You know, why would we do a regional approach to anything? What makes sense? And from an economic development perspective, it's really quite simple. When you're competing at a global stage, you need to use all of the assets you have in a region. And we need to make sure that we're maximizing the investments that are being made, whether they be investments made by governments or individual businesses. We need to maximize those. We don't have the luxury of having duplication. We don't have the luxury of having, you know, gaps in the ecosystem that we have to have when we're competing at a global layer. So regionalization really does get at a lot of those sort of challenges that we have from a business perspective. The other thing that regionalization enables or makes a clearer lens on is how technology is impacting and how technology can be used at a regional level. Remote work is one example of that. You know, if you're in a population challenge or you're trying to grow population, giving localized work capabilities is one way of doing that, and technology is the enabler in that. So again, there are a number of very positive things from regionalization, regardless of what they may be tied into from a local government reform. Regionalization of business and business capabilities should stand on their own. So then the next question I think a lot of people might want to just ask is why Ignite? Well, I think there's really three reasons in my mind why Ignite would be the logical choice for you know, leading through economic development at a regional level. And it comes really down to our history. Ignite is often referred to as a leading economic development organization at a provincial level. That's not us saying it, that's our friends and partners and stakeholders who work with us each day. That comes from the experience. I think that's the second valuable item that we bring to the table. We have experience in all attributes of the economic development agenda. And then finally, it really comes down to performance. The results that we've been able to create in partnership with many stakeholders, because I would also be the first to say that we don't do it all by ourselves. It has to be a collaborative environment that we work in. No one entity controls all the dice at the table. So our results really speak to and are the result of the partnerships that we've created. And just to give you a couple of examples of that on this slide. So two that I think stand out would be, you know, over the last 5 years, about 2,600 jobs are attributed to the work we do. Now that's both direct and indirect. Of that, you'll see examples of cybersecurity as an example. There's more than 200 people in this region now that are deployed. And I speak at a regional level, even though we were born, Ignite was born serving Fredericton, Oromocto, and New Maryland. We've always looked at this regionally because the workforce, the network that's in place, the commuting, the commercial traffic, all of those things that you look at has a larger footprint than what is referred to as the CMA now of Oromocto, New Maryland, and Fredericton. Another, I think, key element is really what's the return on investment. So if you look at the bottom of the slide, for every dollar that's been invested in Ignite Fredericton on an annual basis, $16 are returned through two very unique paths. One is direct taxation that happens, and the second is the consumer spending that happens in the region. Remember, I said that consumer spending is an indicator of economic development. Consumer spending is not economic development. It's just the outcome of that. So when we're giving a return of 1 to 16, I think those results will stand, you know, up against, you know, most anything that we evaluate from a performance perspective. So the next slide is really just to deal with what does what's the scope and what is the regional economic development framework? So first and foremost, it is to represent all the communities of the capital region. Obviously, each community has uniquenesses and differences. The economic development requirements of the city of Fredericton is different than what would be in Gagetown. Our role as Ignite is to really figure out how do we bring those together in a very collaborative way and make sure that we're maximizing all those investments and all those opportunities. But it is to represent the economic development fortune of the entire region, whether you're a community, a town, a village, or a rural district. And that's the role that we would play, and that's the strategy that we have built into our proposal. It also aligns to the mandate. I mean, it's a benchmark of review, or it's a benchmark of what's trying to be accomplished from the economic development aspect of a local government reform. So the strategic planning and focus on economic development is there, creating investment-ready communities. You know, this is a statement the government makes under local government reform, but in reality, it's the communities themselves that will create the investment readiness. And it's Ignite's role to help communities understand how to do that and what is required to have an investment ready community. It isn't simply having a building. It isn't simply having, you know, a transportation network. It isn't simply having a workforce. It's a myriad of all of those things. And we have to bring them in concert in delivering from an economic development perspective. Supporting a healthy business ecosystem. We have the backbone of the economy of New Brunswick, and quite frankly, Canada, is built on organizations that have 10 people or less. And the business healthy ecosystem is what's important for those businesses to be able to survive. They need to have clear policy. They need to have clear advocacy. They need to understand the playing field that they're working, and that's what our role is to do. And then finally, that's included in the mandate, is the workforce and population growth. So as I mentioned in the very first slide, the biggest challenge that collectively all businesses have today is the war on talent. And that has and will get the most of our attention from an economic development perspective. So the model, what's the model look like? There's many ways of describing it, but it is a model that really has a hub and spoke design to it. It's a model that recognizes there's a core strength, there's opportunities, there's logistic channels, there's remote work capabilities, there's transportation, there's population, there's access to labor. All of those things are part of what the model has to involve, but the model really has to ensure that we engage all communities. You can't leave a community behind and have success at a regional level. That doesn't mean that all communities will have the same opportunities. The opportunities that a community have are somewhat unique to them. So we have to make sure we're maximizing what those are. And the second aspect that's inside the model is really about aligning to those priorities. The priority of businesses in Gagetown, I'm sure, will be different than the priorities of businesses, let's say, in Minto or Chipman. There will be some crossover, there will be some uniqueness and comparisons, but there's a uniqueness that we have to make sure from an Ignite perspective that we understand. So our role is to also build a relationship with each and every one of the communities so we can understand how best can we support that. We're not going to be the savior of everything. We're not going to fix every problem that's in the ecosystem. What we can do, though, is bring light and bring energy to try to solve those and move collectively the regions forward. So that's what the model is intended to do. Keys to success. These are ones that I believe strongly in, that in order to be successful in economic development, whether it's regional or localized or however you approach it, you really have to have an entrepreneurial lens. So the voice of reason, the voice of direction, the voice of leadership, the voice of guidance needs to come from the entrepreneurial lens, needs to come from business. This is not for, elected officials to make decisions on. We have to set the policy and we have to set the direction, absolutely. But when it comes to focus and services and requirements, business voice needs to be the most significant at the table. We have to ensure that all stakeholders in community are represented. There's nothing worse than leaving a community out not feeling as though its voice is being heard. Our role is to be able to ensure that happens. Communicating, on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, whatever is required, because really when it comes down to communication, it's about reporting, and it's not about due diligence so much. It's about reporting and the accountability that comes with that. recognizing that each and every one of the communities will have uniquenesses that we have to address. So the accountability to that and the reporting of that has to be customized. Of course, we're going to make every effort we can to economize. You know, if we're doing a board level report, hopefully that report will be sufficient for communities. But we'll have to work through each one of those as we deliver them for the first time or as we deploy the service. Investment is really absolutely a requirement. The tactical and long-term view. If an individual, organization, community wanted to make a one-year investment in economic development, I would say put your money in the bank and draw interest. This is a multi-year, multi-focused requirement, economic development. It's not something to start and stop. It's something to determine how you're going to do it and then move forward logically year after year, one foot in front of each other, building infrastructure, building process, building understanding, building the network that needs to be to drive economic development. And then finally, it's collaborative. There is no one organization that is going to have all the answers and is going to be able to direct everything. You know, we already have multiple players in the economic development space. Opportunities New Brunswick is there. CBDC network is there. We have lots of private organizations that provide coaching and services inside the business world. So we have to make sure that we're collaborative across those. Those are the elements of success in everything that we've been successful to date on economic development. I suggest that those are the ones that we move forward with. This slide, I'm only going to touch on this slide from one perspective. The framework that we see here, the Regional Economic Development Framework, which was developed after the mandate guide. We went through the exercise of doing that. And then we also went through the exercise of looking at what our current strategic framework is at Ignite. And we already have in place at Ignite the framework necessary at a regional level, where the pillars of Ignite are aligned around economic growth and advocacy. They're aligned around entrepreneurialism and innovation, population growth, workforce development, and infrastructure investment. Those are the same, worded slightly different than what's in the mandate guide. So Ignite is already positioned to have inherent success inside the framework that's being established. This slide just really gives you a sense of the services that we have developed over a number of years. It's a full comprehensive list of services. I'm glad to go through it individually if anybody wants to, but just suffice to say there's a lot of programming and services that we've built up over a number of years. Planet Hatch would be one example of delivery of economic development services and entrepreneurial innovation. I spoke to this earlier, so I'm going to slip by this slide, but just to drive home again the point, there are multiple partners, multiple stakeholders. Ignite's role, we've described ourselves as a catalyst agency. We are not arrogant enough to think that we create every success story that happens in our region. What we are, though, is the catalyst agency that brings the stakeholders together so that collectively we can create the opportunities and take advantage of the infrastructure and the opportunities, but also to deal with the challenges that we have. You know, when you think about recovery coming out of the pandemic, it took a number of stakeholders to be around the table to deal with the recovery plans and support business. Collaboration with partners. I've talked about that. I will highlight that we see the advantage of working with First Nations as well. There is significant representation within our region, and I don't think we can have a holistic economic development strategy that we aren't involving First Nations in. So governance and organization metrics, reporting more of the logistics. So as you see from the graphic on this slide, we are Ignite, but we are organizing around Ignite Capital Region. So there's a dedicated resource and organizational structure for that. And we're also organizing around Ignite Western Valley, and it's a dedicated resource for that. We are not moving resources from Fredericton to Woodstock. We're not moving resources, to accommodate something being either taken away or added to. The investment that we have in our funding represents requirements for the region, and the Western Valley region stands on its own. So what does that mean for the capital region? So we're currently a team of 14. Our plan grows us to 19. These are the roles that are included in our proposal: economic development, population growth, workforce development, entrepreneurial services, management, marketing, administration. The 2 points on this slide that I think are most important is back to my comments on business. We will be establishing an advisory committee, which is participating by the communities that we represent, all of the communities. And we expect that to be the voice of business. We expect that business will populate that advisory committee. The Ignite board will have a representation that represents the region. And from a stakeholder and community perspective, we understand that reporting and accountability has to be a component. So MOUs and service level agreements we're very used to, and that will be part of the model going forward. Performance metrics and reporting. Again, this slide is just a bit generic in that it gives you some sense as to the depth of reporting, the depth of the way we manage the metrics and manage the operation today. There's obviously regional or there's annual metrics. There's long-term targets, such things as tax-based population increase. There's activity reporting that's part of our, I'll call it the management of what we do. And then the existing board reports that we have. We would hope that we can economize on this as much as possible, but as customization needs to be done, as we need to provide reporting to each community, then we'll have to address that through consultation with all those communities. This is just an example of what the metrics that we manage today look like. So there's job growth metrics, there's investment attraction metrics, there's new startups. All of the things or all of the elements that you would have in an economic development agenda are measured within what we do. So the financials, I know that most of you have seen these, and what we put forth, we were asked to put forth a plan that delivers economic development to the best of the ability we can within a price structure that is reasonable from the communities. So our proposal is just under a cent on the tax rate. We also have pre-negotiated with Petal. That funding is there. So there's about 731,000 plus a top up on performance. That's to address population growth, workforce development, all of those areas that Petal have identified. So the total funding package would be 2.1. The budget forecast is really dealing with the existing services that we deal with, and it's also dealing with the existing marketing communications that we do. We're not suggesting that there's going to be a massive marketing campaign that's created that's well beyond the budgets that we have in place today. So it is in the budgets and the current what we have today. And then currently from a reporting perspective, I should highlight that we are on a quarterly reporting, but that doesn't mean that we don't have communication. It doesn't mean that there's information going back and forth on a regular basis. We would share that obviously with the RSC as well. So in finalize and just summarize what our proposal does, or what the solutions that Ignite would lead would be to establish and implement a strategic regional economic development plan. So that's a foundational plan. Establish a regional population growth plan. Establish and implement a workforce plan. I've already got that almost done. That's been worked on because we've got stakeholders and partners around the table that have regional view already. Establish a regional economic development advisory committee, implement the entrepreneurial support. So startup companies today, by the time our services are deployed, they will have a resource pool to draw upon. Investment readiness within a region, guide and help communities become investment ready. That will be different for each and every community. And in some cases, it's investment readiness for population or for remote work versus investment readiness for a new mill or a new manufacturing plant. Those will be specific to each of the regions or each of the communities. Operational relationships with the communities is really going to be important. As I said before, we are a catalyst agency. We're only going to be successful by the partners and stakeholders that we work with and the relationships that we form. So each and every one of the communities are important in that. And finally, it's really the stakeholder governance reporting and accountabilities that will come with the work that Ignite does today. I will pause there and take any questions. I'll stop sharing my screen. There, I can see everybody again.
So maybe I'll just jump in quickly, and like Larry said, I think now would be the appropriate time if any of the board members have any questions for Larry. Feel free to raise your hands. I see the hands coming up already.
Yes, Director Wilson, she was there first.
Hi, Larry. Thank you for your presentation. I've got several comments to make. The first one, and I noticed you didn't number your the pages in your documentation, so I went ahead and did it so I could make reference. Referring to page 15 and 16, the performance metrics and reporting, and then the KPIs. Page 15, if you could break the performance metrics down by municipality or an entity, so each community knows exactly what the benefits are to their residents for the cost involved. And on page 16, the KPIs, amend the KPIs to reflect a need to show the KPIs for each regional municipality or entity individually. And it would be nice if you could show specific development goals for each regional municipality or entity. And then on to the financials, that's on page 17, and you did hit on that with your slide show. One is budget forecast supports existing, and I'm not going to complete the sentence. And the second bullet was budget forecast supports existing, and that was the marketing. Does this mean that there'll be no new programs? And if there are, who will cover these costs and who will approve the cost?
Yeah, so do you want me to answer those questions now?
Yes,
Maurice?
please.
Okay.
Oh,
So on the,
sorry.
on the first questions, in terms of the breakdown on community, it will be, all of that will depend on the results that we can actually get access to. So some of the population growth numbers, as an example, if Petal's not tracking them that way, we don't have the ability to track other than what those are done. But the intent would be to take any of the measurements down to the lowest common denominator that we possibly can. In terms of the existing programming, what I'm trying to refer to there is the services that I included on one of the earlier slides. There's already a defined set of services and programs that we do. Those would be the ones that we're moving forward with. If there are new ones that have to be created for whatever change in the marketplace, then we would have to have a conversation with the RSC and the members as to how do we want to handle that. So it's really intended to be the scope of work that we've detailed currently is the work that we've also built into our budget.
Thank you.
Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Jeff McFarland looks to be the next handout.
Hey, Larry, thanks for the presentation. We've worked a lot together on the roadmaps and implementation of regional jurisdictions before. And one of the issues that always comes up is creating safe landing spots for communities, and Ignite and Planet Hatch are amazing tech savvy places, but a rural place like Stanley, how do you propose to reach out and provide some of those services within a community like ours?
Yeah, so one of the things we've already done, we've already opened up a conversation with Petal. I will send to Brett and Maurice for distribution. There's a model that has been deployed in Ireland that looks at regional capabilities from communal activities. So it's setting up small hubs of working centers in smaller jurisdictions. We've already been having some conversation with Petal about how can we bring those models into our region. So Jeff, it would be try to take advantage of that. Of course, technology is going to play a significant role. There's going to be opportunities for your community to network into programming that we're already doing. But the reverse of that, so to build community integration, those programs that we've been delivering at Planet Hatch, we may deliver them from Stanley as an example, and then host other members to come in through the network to Stanley. In the same way that if we host something at Planet Hatch, then Stanley business and entrepreneurs will be able to network into that. So it'd be a combination of those types of approaches.
Thank you.
I believe Mayor Kitchen is next. Ian?
Thank you. Hi, Larry. Ian from Nakwik, Mayor Nakwik, and I know you're familiar with Destination Nakwik Development Corporation, and just wondering how you see that fitting in with the regional approach, or how do you working together or whatnot?
Yep.
going
So
forward?
we've had a lot of conversations with NACWIC. NACWIC is one of those areas that has already made some significant investments in economic development, and kudos to NACWIC. Oromocto, Frederick, Numer, a lot of people have made some investment. So we're not about to create and duplicate what is already there. So I've said many times to Destination NACWIC that whatever you don't provide or aren't providing that's inside the scope of the work that we do, we're going to provide. If there's things that you want to continue to provide, you certainly can do that. We will match into that, whatever that looks like. So the first sort of exercise, I think, is to really just map what it is that you are doing and compare it to the services that we are going to be offering at a regional level and determine how we move forward in those.
All right. Just, I guess our biggest concern is that we don't want to be paying for double service. If we're going to put money in ourselves and the service is going to be provided by the RSC that we're paying for, then it doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, what I would say again, Ian, in all the conversations I've had with Brent and teams members in NACWIC, from our perspective, how it gets paid for, the policies around that's NACWIC and the RSC and in local government form, you can figure that out. What we're going to do is what the services that we are providing, there's a scope of those services. Those that you aren't going to provide, we will. Those that you are providing, we won't. So from our perspective, we're not going to provide duplication. We're going to match up to what those are. And it will be, NACWIC to make the decision of how far you want to go on the existing services that you're providing.
Well, it'll be NACWIC, Millville, rural community that decides.
Right. Yep, totally.
I believe Mayor Rogers, you're up.
Thank you. I'm actually going to start with something that wasn't my question. I'm kind of just following up on what Ian's saying, just to clarify. So Larry, are you saying that if a municipality is already doing something, they should continue doing it and you would just augment? Or is the idea that you could help take over and help deliver what the community is already doing? Because my sense is, and Ian, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm thinking out of from my own context. I'm hearing him say he doesn't want to double dip. So I would have thought the assumption would be all the good stuff that's happening in those communities, Ignite look and help in their delivery of regional economic development.
Yeah,
so, is it?
That's exactly what I'm trying to say. I'm maybe not communicating very well. We are not going to duplicate something that's going on. We can come in and augment the services and add to it. Or if communities want to relinquish those and have us take them over, what's created, we'll be glad to do that. But it's, if NACWIC decides that it wants to, beyond its investment that it makes at the regional level, wants to do something, then they'll make that decision. My role, Ignite's role, is to make sure that we match into whatever that decision is.
Okay. So whether it be augment or whether it be takeover, that is something that can be determined. I'm thinking of like a shop fed local. So I'll use a local example so I don't have to talk about other people's. I'm thinking of that something that was initiated by us, but Ignite was very much there helping us push that. So it was very much this joint effort. So something like that. Okay. So now I'll go back to, I had two questions. One, I know we were talking about entrepreneurial supports and you sort of answered it in a question, I think, one of Judy's questions. So Planet Hatch would continue. You're just saying you would extend that throughout the region. So it's not like, right? Is that sort of the?
That's correct. Planet Hatch would, entrepreneurial, we're not going to develop new entrepreneurial programming. We've been at it now for 8 years or 7 years, and we've got it pretty much figured out what's important, what's required. So we would just make that available to the entire region. How we do that is going to depend upon numbers and economies and all of those things. But even if we only had one person, and I'll go back to the Stanley, one person wanting to take advantage of a program that's happening in Planet Hatch, it might make sense to have that person network in via technology. But we want to work in a way, though, that if we could reverse that, maybe it's, to show community interest and support, we would actually deliver the program from Stanley on a particular item and then network Fredericton in or network Oromocto in, just simply so that we're engaging the communities, and it isn't always a one-way traffic.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think it's great. That's good for everyone. It's good for everyone kind of to leave comfort zones and go out. And so the vice versa. I like that. I would hate to think there was Planet Hatch was stuck someplace and everybody had to come to it. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. Although Planet Hatch is good and the proof's been in the pudding at some of what's come out of there. So but my main question is about governance. I'm just curious, what happens to the existing board for Ignite? Presumably that is dismantled and a new board is created that's reflective of the regional representation. Did I understand that correctly?
Well, I think there's a process, Mayor Kate, that has to go through. I mean, Ignite is an organization, an entity by itself. It has its own charter, it has its own bylaws. And what the intent is to do is to ensure we have regional representation. So in some cases, or in the case, it will be over a period of time, that board will have to migrate, whether it's completely sort of stop at one point and recreate it. The board that exists today and the governance that exists today will have to incorporate that in. So after the capital region says, yes, we'd like Ignite to move forward, then we have to do some governance and bylaw work ourselves to get ready for January of 2023. At the end state, however long it, because I actually think it's going to take probably the best part of a year to 18 months to implement. You know, there's a significant amount of hiring. There is a significant amount of work around bylaws and governance that has to be put in place. And there's a board that has to do that. But the new mandate that's going to be provided is it has to be regional in its representation. So it can't be all, you know, Fredericton representation, or as today, or Moncton, Maryland and Fredericton. The thing that also you should note is the current board for Ignite has modified itself over a number of years. And it is really an entrepreneurial represented board. We have a heavy amount of representation by entrepreneurs. And an entrepreneur in Chipman and an entrepreneur in Fredericton, in a lot of cases, have the same requirements from a board perspective. So we can get a lot of cross-pollination between communities. But the intent is to have representation at a regional level.
Okay. So we'll see the evolution of that board into that, because I know it's referred to as an advisory committee, but really the advisory committee then will be the board.
No,
evolve? No,
I'm sorry, I should make that clear. The advisory group is a new component, and that will have representation from each of the participating communities. The community will make their decision of who they want. I'm hoping that the communities will pick a business leader in their region, but the communities will have that latitude. That advisory committee will be an advisory committee to the management team of Ignite and will guide us in our decisions at managerial operational levels and requirements. It will also have a voice of reason or guidance that will be brought into their own representative on the RSC board. The board of Ignite is a separate board that falls under its corporate guidelines. That board in itself will as well have representation at a regional level.
Perfect. Okay. So, but dually, they will be regionally represented. Everyone can feel comfortable that there will be representation in both advisory and board. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you for clarifying. Thanks, Larry.
John Williamson, you have your hand up.
Thank you for the presentation, and I must say it's a lot to digest, and I'm not going to even pretend to understand everything, but it's more of a follow-up to the question that was being asked about the governance structure and the timing of the evolution, I think is the word that was used, and whether or not assuming, let's say, that the RSC is going to proceed with an arrangement, would the arrangement not have some assurances as to the involvement of, the evolution of the governance structure, and not simply, I guess, stay with or start with an advisory committee?
Yeah, so look, I'm sure Maurice and Brett will want to chime in here, but there's obviously an MOU and a service level agreement that the RSC, the Capital Region, is devising we will be a party to that. I'm speaking about the elements on the Ignite side, right? So the advisory committee is a requirement that we're putting out there that says we want representation from each of the communities to help guide us with those important decisions and to be representatives of the community. We also recognize that from a governance perspective, we need to ensure that it's representative of the clientele we service. So the clientele we service are business people, the clientele we service are communities. So the representation of our board has to reflect that. But we have our own statute of incorporation that has to be adhered to in our own bylaws. So we'll have to go through a process of augmenting and changing those. But so I would see there's a framework on the MOU that gets established. We then have to incorporate the requirements that MOU has from us into our own bylaws and into our own organizational structure. But what we're saying is there's an advisory committee that gives you representation on day one. And then there's a board element that gives you governance representation long-term.
Okay, so the MOU you're seeing as a, and I guess from the RSC's perspective, I won't say control, but some ability to direct the activities Ignite is performing on a regional basis, at a regional level.
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in, Larry.
Sure.
Yes, that's exactly the case, John.
Okay.
Once, and again, I don't want to assume anything, but I'll use the word loosely, assume. Once it's decided, if RSC11, the Capital Region RSC, is going to outsource economic development services to an organization such as Ignite, once that decision is made, then we proceed to work on an MOU. And that MOU will obviously have all the legalese that an MOU typically has, but it'll have a series of appendices which will outline in very specific detail exactly what we expect the performance to be, the deliverables to be, the KPIs to be, the accountability mechanism, the governance mechanisms, in order to ensure that what it is we're buying into, we're going to get delivered on the back end by Ignite. And my hope is that, if we proceed, if we look like we're proceeding positively in that direction, what I would like to do is I would like to engage some of the people who have been working with Ignite in the past. I'm talking about the city of Fredericton, I'm talking about Oromocto, maybe New Maryland, get representation from those communities to sit down with Brett and I to work with Ignite on the content of that MOU in order to ensure that it's to the satisfaction of those who have had experience working with Ignite in the past, and that we can learn from the circumstances that have existed with those relationships, and we can build upon that, have a very solid MOU going forward to ensure that we get what we're told we're going to get at the end of the day.
Okay, that's very helpful. I appreciate that. And that allays some of my concerns. As I said at the beginning, I'm still trying to digest all of the presentation, and there is a lot there.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thank you, John.
Mayor Wilson-Shee, you have a question.
Thank you. I'm a little confused over Mayor Ian's comments, and I need clarification. That has been brought up before and by the board, and we've talked about it. And I was on the understanding that the response was that every municipality or an entity had to pay the allotted cost. So from hearing Larry speaking, there could be some room in there to negotiate.
No,
Well,
that's
I think,
not.
maybe I'll just jump in and maybe set the record straight for kind of how it's going to work going forward. And again, please, I'll ask everyone, don't shoot the messenger. It's been decided as part of local governance reform that there will be a series of mandated services delivered starting January 2023 by the 12 regional service commissions in New Brunswick. It's been decided that one of those services is economic development, another one is tourism promotion, and a series of others. It's been decided that all of the entities within each of the RSCs will contribute financially to the delivery of those services. Where similar services are already being delivered by entities, they can carry on to execute and implement those services within their particular jurisdiction. There's absolutely nothing that stops them from carrying on with the delivery of those services at the local level. But when a decision is made on a delivery mechanism for a service to be carried out by the RSC on behalf of all of the entities will be obligated to contribute to the delivery of those services across the region. I think Larry can explain this, but from what I understand, Larry is simply suggesting that if there are services that are going to continue to be carried out by the municipality of Nakowick and Millville, Larry and Ignite would ensure that they're not duplicating on the delivery of those services if they're effectively being carried out at the local level. Is that correct, Larry?
Yeah, that's correct. And it's intended to be, from an Ignite perspective, an accommodation of whatever the uniquenesses are within a community that they may want to do, whether it's part of their mandated service or not. If they, in Nakowick's case, if they want to continue on and they want to do a service or something that's in our portfolio, I'm not going to come in and duplicate that. We will partner with and we will align to what the communities are doing.
Okay, but they'll still have to pay the allotted cost.
Every community will have to be contributing their proportionate share to the delivery of those mandated services across the region. Yes.
Thank you for the clarification. I had another feeling there that it wasn't going to go that way, but I hope, Ian, that you understand that too.
Ian, yeah, Ian's there.
I guess my concern is that I guess we need to know what services are going to be provided to the area from Ignite, and then decide whether what we're doing is a duplication of service. Because I'm not sure that we're going to pay for something that we're going to get from Ignite, because we have to pay through Ignite anyway. So it's going to be some negotiating on what services are being offered from Ignite and RSC11, and those that we're doing that complement that. I think is what we need to go forward from.
Absolutely, and I think that makes a great deal of sense, Ian. I think we're probably not at the point where we're gonna define the very specific type of work that Ignite will be carrying out. I envisage personally that at the beginning, assuming again if Ignite is selected, that one of the things they need to do is, and they've done this before, but they need to do it again. I think they need to go out and visit all of the communities, get a better understanding of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and so on that exist in all of the communities, hear what the communities have to say about the type of work that they think Ignite could be doing, how they could leverage existing opportunities that exist in the various communities, then build a vision, a strategy, a game plan, and start to execute that. So we're a little ways away from defining, I think, the level of detail that you're talking about, but it makes a great deal of sense once that detail is defined, Ian, to look at what you're doing in Nakowick and see whether it makes sense for you to perhaps contribute to that work being done at a regional level, but maybe there are portions of work that you're already doing that aren't going to be covered that you want to carry on funding at a local level. And in that regard, I think that's where Larry is suggesting the work that Ignite would do would be to complement what you would be doing in that community at that time.
Right. Thank you very much, Maurice. John Williamson, you've been patiently waiting. Go ahead.
Thank you. And it's actually a question that I had before and thought I'd wait until later to ask, and I think follows on the discussion of the perhaps duplication, but it's duplication of the services that Ignite's now providing to, and if I'm understanding correctly, mostly Fredericton, Oromocto, and Hamwell. So just curious whether or not those services that are being provided currently to those stakeholders are now going to be replaced by the regional services that Ignite will be providing to all of the entities in the region, which would include those three, Fredericton, Oromocto, and New Maryland.
So I think I follow your question. In the service areas that we cover today is Fredericton, Oromocto, and New Maryland. We provide services to businesses in Hanwell, not because we're mandated to, because it just makes sense for us to do, because they're businesses in the region, right? But what we will be doing is Fredericton or Moncton, Maryland aren't going to lose anything that they currently have. The services that they currently have are within the service guideline, that one slide that I sort of went over quickly. There's a number of services that are there. All of those services are part of our portfolio that now will go to the entire region. But it goes without saying that with 65% of the businesses in the region inside the boundary of the city of Fredericton, that the quantity of work is going to still be very much Fredericton centric from a delivery at a business level. But population growth support, newcomer retention, entrepreneurial services, investment attraction, all of those things that are defined as services will now be done for the entire region.
Okay, I think that answers the question. And if I'm understanding it, it is in a sense replacing. So the regional services that you will be providing to all entities will more or less replace what is currently being provided to particularly those three, or primarily those three local governments.
I mean, the way you're describing it, technically, yes. I would describe it differently, though. I would say the services that we provide to those three areas remain intact, and we extend out to the other areas the services that they require.
Yeah, I guess if I was, and I'm not, but perhaps the other, those three entities might be wondering, I'm not sure what compensation, what they are contributing for the services they're currently receiving. But that's not really a matter for the RSC.
Mhm.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Larry. Mayor Morrison, you have a question. Dave, you're on mute.
There. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I guess what everybody's concerned with is cost. And I'm just putting out the worst case scenario, see if I understand this correctly. What you're saying is, in the worst case scenario, like if Nakawik does everything themselves that Ignite does. Now, this is the worst case scenarios. If in fact they do that and they don't require the services of Ignite, they're going to pay for it anyway. Is that my understanding? Is that correct?
These are mandated services to which all entities within the RSC will be making a contribution. And
Using them or not?
But the rationale is very simply, we had 300 odd communities and entities in this province, and a tremendous streamlining has taken place in order to avoid a massive patchwork of municipalities from one end of the province to the other. And in the same way, if we start to make exceptions about this community can do this and that one can opt out of this, you're going to continue to perpetuate this patchwork of services and patchwork of communities that are doing this or that or the other thing. And you're just not going to maximize the benefits you're going to get by regional collaboration and cooperation. That, I think, is fundamentally the rationale behind doing it. It's not to penalize communities that have done extraordinarily well, such as Nakawik. You know, they're a very, very strong success story. There's no question about it. There's no denying it. It's not intended to encumber the success that they've realized, nor to inhibit that success. It's intended to enhance the service quality that is delivered to all of the entities within each of the regional service commissions across the province. And ultimately, that's the objective. And I, for one, and I know others are hopeful that Nakawik can carry on and contribute and participate in the regional delivery of services and continue with their own service deliveries that they want to take place and carry out in their own community.
Okay, so that's answering my question. Is I understand correctly? Use them or not, you're going to pay for them. That's quite simply stated.
I think that's what I said, but maybe I
Yep.
didn't. Anyway, if I didn't,
Oh yeah, you said that in a longer approach, but that's the gist of it. It's going to cost you whether you use it or not.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Chamberlain. You have a question?
Yes, without going into too much detail, I wonder if we could have perhaps from Larry an example. If let's say a manufacturing entity wants to move into our area, would the process be that they would contact Ignite and then Ignite would help them with any kind of problems they have, or help them with monetary funding, tax credits, whatever, to entice business? Maybe just an example about what would that entail if a manufacturing company did want to move into our area? How would it be handled?
So I can give you a real example of a manufacturing company that moved into Keswick. So Keswick was outside of our direct jurisdictional area, but it's Fredericton and Fredericton region, and we're not going to back away from an opportunity. And this was a couple of years ago. So that company was relocating out of Chicago, and it wanted to be in a non-metro location. They themselves had narrowed into Keswick, and we provided them full investment attraction support on that move. So we aligned them to the stakeholders that they need to work with. So in the funding level, as an example, that's Opportunities New Brunswick. So let's be clear, Ignite does not have funding. We don't provide incentive programs. We don't fund actual business development from a wage offset or any of those government funds that are brought in. ONB does that. But what we do is we provide the conduit for that company to make contact with ONB, to make contact with Petal, to make contact with whatever department that they need to get support on setting their business up. Then we also worked as a bridge point between the existing business in the region for logistics and supply. We helped them, supported them in labor and labor arbitrage, finding resources, and also in the real estate and finding their operational center that they had. And I'm pleased to say that company is still in operation now 5 or 6 years later, and I think it's doubled or tripled its size. And that's typical investment attraction. So each one is going to be somewhat different. Each company wants something different or needs something different. And our role is to make sure that we are bringing whatever attributes are in the region to bear to the benefit of that company.
Thank you, Larry.
Mayor Pleadwell.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No worries. I get both. Larry, thanks for the presentation. And I'll say, from the Village of Gagetown's perspective, this is new. We haven't been playing in the ball game. Others around this table have played in with your organization now. And I'll say from our perspective, or from Gagetown's perspective, this investment gives us a horse in a race where we don't have to pay for the stable or harvest the hay to feed the horse. And really, and put it in context for us, the cost is less than what we pay for street lights. And we're one of 6 communities that will be participating on this. And we haven't been doing economic development, and we could really use the support, but make it well sure that we would be holding your organization's feet to the fire with strong SLAs and making sure those KPIs are met and suitable for this broader group, of which we are one. So that's basically my comment.
One of the things I would just add to that, Derek, because of the region that you're in, I go there often, but and I know David Seabrook's gone after me, but there is a strong linkage between economic development and tourism. I'd say there's a direct line. So even though it's being approached by 2 different authors, if you will, from tourism and economic development, Dave and I work together on numerous opportunities. You can't separate tourism from economic development, and you can't separate economic development from tourism. So there's a strong collaboration that has to happen on multiple fronts. And in your jurisdiction, being a boater myself, but having the ability to have a river system that we have, there is a economic development opportunity from a tourism perspective on that. So these things are very much going to be aligned, and strategy within those are going to have to be developed.
Already, I'm calling NB Power to take the street lights out so we can pay for it.
Thank you, Larry. I don't mean to speak on behalf of the chair, Mr. Chair, but we are approaching the end of the allotted time for the questions to be directed to Larry. I see Mayor Powell has a question. Maybe we should take Mayor Powell's question and then move on to David Seabrook's presentation, if you're in agreement. All right, Mayor Powell.
Okay. Yeah, Larry, you've really did a lot of good work in academia with Knowledge Park and cyber security and all that stuff. And we pay 30 grand right now, right? And so what's going to be the difference if we pay 5 times more than that? What's Oromocto going to get different than what we already have received?
So I think what's going to happen is we're going to be increasing our staff. So there's more of us to go around. So Oromocto will have the benefit of that. When you begin to look at things regionally, as take cyber as an example, that is a very Fredericton-centric initiative, but Oromocto needs to play a significant role in cyber, particularly around the military base. So the fact that we go regional from that mandate, that has to be incurred. Now, you're right, we've already had that in our scope because Oromocto's part of it. So I think, you know, when you look at what you are getting today, you're going to get more resources. You're going to have more dedication to those resources because we're increasing our pool. You get the ability from the regional perspective of opportunities that get identified beyond your boundaries that now may be an opportunity with inside your boundary, logistical supplies, workforce, etc. And then finally, the ability for us to move services out of Planet Hatch as an example, and give them more directly in Oromocto's territory on a more cost-effective basis. You'll benefit from that as well.
Okay. But in the long run, there's no guarantees. There's no guarantees that we're going to get anything.
Well, there's no guarantees in economic development. The last thing that you'll ever hear from me is I will guarantee a certain outcome. I will guarantee you a certain focus and a certain investment being made, but there are many extenuating circumstances that at the end of the day dictate sometimes what happens. The pandemic would be one that you could use as an example. Some of our results tanked during the pandemic. We don't control that. The other side of it, I would say, Mayor Powell, is, and this is not meant to be negative, but the cost of what we do today is not representative of the investments that are made in the communities as well. $30,000 for the work we do. When you look at the amount of people that benefit from the jobs that are created that fall directly into Oromocto, one might argue that there should have been a higher rate for that to start with. So I think what the best way of looking at it is to make sure that the services that we are delivering today work with the town of Oromocto, work with all the stakeholders to make sure that we are bringing those services to your community in the fashion that you need them to be brought.
In the hope in that fashion, yes.
Fair enough.
Yes, exactly. I got a question for Maurice. No, thanks, Larry. I appreciate the answer. Maurice, I got a question. Now that economic development is going to go regionally, what's the role of the province in that now?
Well, the province has delineated for all of the mandated services. They've delineated what they see as the role in economic development. So, for example, they've identified, the principal areas that Opportunities New Brunswick is going to be involved in. They've identified the areas where the RSCs are going to be responsible and involved in. And they've also as well gone so far as to identify some of the areas that municipalities will still be involved in, such as with industrial parks and so on. So they have broken them down. I don't have them all off the top of my head right now, obviously, but we can certainly provide you that kind of breakdown if you're interested in seeing it. It's information that's been made available to the various associations, and all of the executive directors have gotten it, the transition facilitators, and certainly it's public information. And I certainly could provide that to you, Bob, if you're interested in seeing it.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I guess I just want to make this point, not just to you, Bob, but to everybody. I keep hearing this reference to cost, and I guess I tend to refer to it more as an investment. I understand you folks all have constituencies. I know a little bit about politics. I've been involved in it for some time, so I understand you all have constituencies and you all have to go back to them. But at the same time, every once in a while, you've got to look at something as an opportunity, and you've got to look at it as an investment. And you know, if Fredericton and Oromocto and New Maryland hadn't looked at the prospect of Ignite delivering economic development services as an opportunity and investment, Ignite wouldn't have gotten that money, and we probably wouldn't see anywhere near the economic development success that we've seen in Fredericton in recent years, as outlined in the report that I circulated from David Campbell. So I would just encourage everyone to, I recognize you got to go back and you got to justify the costs and everything, but at the end of the day, we've also got to be mindful that this is not only a cost, but it's also an investment. Anyway, thanks for the question, Bob. I appreciate it.
Yeah, but with investment, there's usually results. So, and
Well,
if there was results, I mean, the money's a good investment, right?
And I would say, if you haven't done so, read the report that David Campbell produced for Ignite, and I think you'll see that Ignite is largely responsible for the economic development success that's been experienced in the capital region over the last number of years.
Definitely in the Fredericton especially. Yeah, totally agree.
And they've been putting in the lion's share of money too. And what we're suggesting now.
That's right. But they're getting results.
But
Exactly.
what we're saying is, if we get everybody to make an investment, then presumably what is it? All tides lift a rising. No, rising ship lifts all tides, or whatever the expression is. I don't know. But my point is simply that I think if we all kind of get into this together, I think we can make it a regional success story over and above however you want to characterize the success story of the previous years. That's all.
We'll say $16. $16 for every $1 invested is pretty good. Like, that number caught me. I wrote that one down. I'm sure we all write down things in a presentation. I was like, wow, an ROI of you invested all, you get 16 back. That's good.
Well,
Okay.
if I could just add to that, apologies, Mayor Kate, if I cut you off.
No, I cut off Bob.
Bob, on your point of what does OMB do? So I work directly with OMB each and every day. And what OMB's role is on the new sort of horizon is they are going to be the seek and find investment attraction engine, and they are going to be the export driving engine. So they're going to work with, you know, new investments coming into the province, into each of our jurisdictions. They're going to work with existing larger companies that are doing export. So that is back much more traditional to where Opportunities New Brunswick or Business New Brunswick would have been before. On the point of investment and return, again, David Campbell, I think, carries, you know, a significant credibility in the marketplace. The input-output tables that are a result of Stats Canada work, we can identify, of the 2,600 jobs that I talk about being created over the last 5 years, how many of those jobs are in Oromocto's jurisdiction. And we've presented results in the past to both New Maryland, Oromocto, and Fredericton on your own results associated with that. So the 2,600 jobs, there is a certain defined amount of those jobs that end up being in Oromocto's tax base. They end up buying houses and operating and buying and supporting businesses in Oromocto, even though their particular job might be in a downtown location in Fredericton. The reverse of that is too. There's also people coming from Fredericton into Oromocto service at the base. So David Campbell accommodates for those what's referred to as input and output tables out of Stats Canada, and has fairly specific measurements that can quantify those for us, and we depend upon those. And now those are in the report, not broken down by community, but David has done that for us before, and that can be done.
I don't want to cut anybody else off, but we're now 5 minutes, I think, past the scheduled time for this presentation. Larry, I'd like to thank you for the presentation. Very informative, lots of information there, as we said, and so we'll take that and we'll deliberate on that and be back to you. But we're 7:40 on a nice sunny evening, and we have another presentation and discussion around that. So thank you, Larry, for coming along. And Brett, I'd like you to introduce David, please.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Larry. And thank you, Mr. Chair. So next we have David Seabrook. David, correct me if I'm wrong, you're the director of Fredericton Tourism.
I'm the director of Fredericton Tourism, along with our recreation division and our communications division. But for 20 years, I was the manager of Fredericton Tourism, which is now operationally directly run by Stacey Russell, very skilled tourism professional.
Well, that's great. You know what? There's no way I would have gotten that right. So I'm glad I deferred to you.
I barely get it right myself.
Yeah. So David's agreed to provide us with the presentation, and it would be covering the recommended path that we have. And I should have mentioned this earlier with Larry's before Larry's presentation as well. But both of these have been vetted through our working groups and our advisory committees. David had presented this package to both groups. Boy, it must be about a month ago, maybe a month and a half, and it was very well received, and we thought it was worthwhile bringing this forward as well, given the potential cost implications being roughly on par with the economic development proposal. So with that, Maurice, would you like to add anything before David presents?
No, that's good. Thanks. So,
okay, well, David, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I apologize in advance. I'm going to stop from time to time and clear my throat and put myself on mute. I'm still recovering from COVID, and I have a little bit of brain fog as well. So I'm going to apologize if I'm not my usual zippy self. But let's see if we can give this a try with the screen share. And there we go. So can everyone see that screen share?
yes, we can.
Yep.
Very good, thank you. So so I'm going to present a service level proposal to you for tourism services as mandated by the local government reform. And we're very excited about it. We think that it provides us the opportunity to do what we're already doing and expand our services to the entire region, which we already work with to a great degree. And we've got some great assets in our community. We've got obviously some First Nations Indigenous culture, some ski and snowmobile product, lakes, rivers and trails, boating, biking, ATVs, parks and campgrounds, and just some tremendous opportunities in our communities to further the tourism mandate. There's a few, and I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because we only have 15 minutes, and I know you've all seen the proposal before, but there's some of the benefits of tourism to communities. They're very similar to what Larry was discussing, you know, in terms of tax-based contribution, direct employment, and tourism property tax and residential property tax contributions. I want to spend a moment on this slide. This is the mandate that's been given to us, or given to the RSC on tourism. So there's 6 points to it. Establish a destination marketing organization, a regional destination marketing organization with a funding mechanism, or partner with such an organization like Fredericton Tourism if it already exists. Develop a multi-year tourism strategy, market and promote the region to visitors, develop experiential tourism, promote major events, and produce a regional tourism guide. So those are what we have to do under the mandate. What Fredericton Tourism can do as a provider is we can harmonize all this tourism marketing activity throughout the capital region. We're a full service destination marketing organization within the city. We have an existing relationship and do a lot of marketing with many of your tourism operators throughout the region. And we can expand on that. We don't know everybody, but we know quite a few of the players in the region and work with them already. It would require a minimum complementary annual investment from the RSC, which you're discussing, and we think we can provide value for dollar on that investment. Just a little bit about who we are. So Fredericton Tourism has a very clear mandate to generate tourism revenues. We're an award-winning DMO, destination marketing organization with 9 staff. We're a division of the city of Fredericton. We currently provide services to not only Fredericton, but Hanwell through the tourism accommodation levy. So we're funded by City Council, the industry advertising co-ops where various tourism operators contribute to marketing programs, and the tourism accommodation levy or the hotel tax in Fredericton and Hanwell. So, you know, we work in a very distinct way. We have a proven ability. We have a mantra or a slogan within our office that says ring the till. Everything we try to do is aimed at putting money in the hands of our tourism operators throughout the region. We have a destination view. Our customers, our visitors don't see map lines. They never have. When you go on vacation, you don't particularly know where one municipality ends and the next begins. What you're looking at is the total tourism experiences and assets in that community that hold you there for a number of days. So we're visitor focused. We're entirely focused on what it's going to take to make that visitor spend, stay long enough to get another tank of gas, have another meal, stay overnight at one of our hotels or campgrounds. And we're customer centric and we respond to their needs. And I'll just give you a basic example of that. When a visitor comes into our visitor center in Fredericton, if they ask for a hotel with a pool, we only suggest back to them and offer them hotels with pools. So we're very customer centric and not trying to drive things outside of what the customers expressed as their interest. And that's the way that we have determined to maximize economic returns. We're data driven. We use some of the data provided by the province of New Brunswick called EQ, which is a behavioral database that tells us what visitors want in various jurisdictions around Atlantic Canada and the Maritimes. We do a lot of partnerships with New Brunswick Tourism, the airport, other DMOs across the province. And we create demand in the tourism sector by presenting the visitor with market-ready experiences, and that key term is market-ready. We're the region's biggest cheerleaders. How do we do this? What do? We do marketing and sales. We do product development in the tourism sector. We do programming, a little unusual for many tourism offices, but Fredericton Tourism does a lot of programming like Changing of the Guard and concert series and things like that. We do a lot of industry consultation, particularly with festivals and tourism operators looking to develop new experiences. And we do economic impact reporting metrics. So I'll just go through those. Our product development, we develop and facilitate new tourism experiences. The picture here of the Big Axe Brewery, we developed the Taproom Trail, which links through maps and marketing all the microbreweries in the Fredericton area and beyond. And we create those kind of clusters and present them to the visitor. We do a lot of programming, as I mentioned, some of which is directly an opportunity and related to what we can do together as a region. And those would be the ones really at the top there in red. We do the Frostival Winter Festival. That's a creation of Fredericton Tourism. We do the Dine Around Freddy program, which can be expanded to the region, which is a dining program at a very slow time of year for our hospitality sector, where we do a 3-course offer at a particular price point determined by the restaurants, and then we take that to market and drive business into the restaurants at a time when it's particularly slow in January, February, usually coinciding with our Frostival Festival, and as I mentioned, the Taproom Trail. But we also do the Garrison Night Market in Fredericton, probably the most successful new tourism experience to come in Atlantic Canada in the last several years. Heritage walking tours, films, concerts, and management of the Garrison District itself. Just a few pictures there. On the marketing side, we do all the traditional tourism marketing, whether it's advertising in magazines, digital ads, videos. We have a dedicated tourism website that actually already includes a regional pillar. We have an online event calendar that already includes a number of regional events, the major events in the region. We do social media, very strong social media assets that have the ability to drive business to your operators, to your festivals and events, sell tickets. We do a visitor guide, and we run a visitor center, and we do a lot of work with travel influencers, which is a new part of the tourism game. We most recently have refreshed our brand in a broad consultative exercise that included operators not only in Fredericton, but throughout the region, and came with the term life well crafted. And we think that that's well adapted to the region broadly. And we included folks to make sure that we could make that sort of shift to a wider regional approach. We do a lot of sector-based marketing and sales. A lot of this is really invisible to the general public, but drives a lot of business and has a lot of economic returns for us. The meetings and conventions, we have a whole sales partnership with our hotel sector and the Fredericton Convention Center. We do travel trade, which is when you see all those motor coaches coming through the region and into the city of Fredericton. Almost none of those, I would venture none of them, come in without having been touched by Fredericton tourism at a motor coach marketplace, where we convince them to put Fredericton and the region on the itinerary. So when they're visiting King's Landing, that's largely the result of work that we've done. Sport tourism, we have a whole sport tourism coordinator that tries to generate activity in our facilities and put heads in beds as a result of the sport tourism sector. That's been a real growth sector for us. It was the first sector to recover after the pandemic, and really in many ways saved our tourism industry coming out of the pandemic and gave us the highest occupancy rates in our hotels anywhere in Atlantic Canada. And we do air route marketing to support the airport in developing, sustaining, and attracting airlines and the routes that they're promoting. So our budget, just to give you a sense of our current budget, we have about a $3 million budget from City Council, plus the tourism accommodation levy, whatever that raises every year. When we sort of take out the grants to various festivals, events, arts organizations, and the local programming, like the Changing of the Guard and some of the concerts we do in the Garrison District, when we take out those activities, we have a budget of about $1.5 million. That's about 1.7 cents on our municipal tax rate. $600,000 in 2021 came from the tourism accommodation levy, the hotel tax, from the city of Fredericton and Hanwell. And so that's our budget. So 1.5 million and 600,000 for approximately 2.1 million. The results on that were 300, and before the pandemic in 2019, had economic returns to our region of $363 million. That was a lot less during the pandemic. Last year, about $215 million, but we led pandemic recovery. A couple of those programs, I talked about the Dine Around program. We sold 6,000 plates during the Dine Around program this year. That was important to recovery in the restaurant sector. We did 4,400 hotel packages with our Dinners on Us package. So real strong results, again, that led Atlantic Canada. So shifting a little bit from what we do to what the services that we can provide the region as per the mandate. So we believe that we can quite properly and easily expand our services to include the region. We're already doing a bit of it, and we think we can do continue with that with a complementary investment to the existing investment, complementary investment by the Regional Service Commission. We've been asked to propose services based on a $600,000 investment. That's what the RSC and the facilitator has asked us to present to you. And that's the equivalent of about 0.9 cents on the tax rate for the areas outside of the city of Fredericton. And we would propose that that's a renewable agreement every 5 years with annual CPI inflation-based increases. I noticed that Larry had a slightly different formula. It might be good to align the same approach in terms of the length of the term and perhaps how we deal with inflationary increases, whether it's a fixed rate increase or a CPI-based increase. That's certainly worthy talking about. We would propose a graduated approach where in the first year we would begin consultations and the development of a tourism strategy, not only for the city of Fredericton tourism, but also with the region. So we would make a complimentary investment about that on that from the city. And the second year we would complete the strategy, ramp up our marketing, start developing new tourism experiences. And in the third year, we'd really hit our stride and we'd have strategy implementation based on our consultations with communities, integrated marketing and sales, and new products begin to be launched. But we would need some time to sort of ramp up and learn the region and work on a strategy together. The proposed elements, key elements of a service agreement, strategic planning, as I mentioned, marketing and promotion of major events, group sales and sport tourism, major program inclusion, the Dine Around Freddy program, the Tap Room Trail, programs like that. Any program that we would do, we would include all the tourism assets in the region. We would work on developing new tourism experiences with tourism operators, consultation on major events, and obviously a package of metrics and reporting to the RSC. I want to talk just briefly about what would be excluded, because I think, and it came up in the previous conversation, we think that it's in everyone's best interest to keep local control where it belongs. So, projects to do local capital asset development, like the marina in Nakawik, recreation and cultural infrastructure, community festivals and events generated locally and funded locally, and keep local identities like the destination Nakawik. We think that we're all stronger for having those regional or independent identities that are then carried forward under an umbrella to a wider market. Our staffing complement, we would offer all our staff, and by far New Brunswick's most experienced and professional tourism staff. In addition to the existing 9 staff, we would hire 1 new staff person, which would be specifically a regional tourism coordinator, which would work with communities. And obviously we would leverage the existing downtown office space in Fredericton, which is outside City Hall, but right beside City Hall. We would propose that we would do a regional tourism strategy, as I mentioned, that we would have match $50,000 from the RSC built in from that $600,000 with a $50,000 investment from Fredericton Tourism, so that we had a fully coordinated and harmonized tourism strategy moving forward. All the marketing and promotion that we do, as I mentioned, we would offer to the region. I won't get into a lot of detail there, but including, videos, a regional visitor guide as mandated by the province, and include all our partners from across the region in all the consumer shows and marketplaces that we attend. Major events promotion, we would provide more high visibility to major events throughout the region, in addition to, traditional tourism advertising, digital marketing, social media, this would include, festivals like Pioneer Days, the Big Axe Beer Festival, which just occurred, and moving forward that way. We would, meetings and conventions may not be something that may be obvious as a regional service, but if I use the King's Landing and the King's Head Inn as an example, quite often a convention planner is looking for an offsite venue outside of the downtown core and a real unique and evocative experience. Often we drive business to King's Landing and other operators to fulfill that on behalf of the meeting planner. So there's a direct economic benefit felt in the convention sales marketing game. The motor coach, obviously there's an opportunity to expand motor coach itineraries throughout the region. They already visit King's Landing and some other operators throughout the region, but we think there's opportunities there. Sport tourism, very significantly, we think there's opportunities for sport tourism. And I'll just give you an example. This winter, Crab Mountain held the Canadian Junior Moguls Championship. Fredericton Tourism contributed $12,000 to making that happen so that Crab Mountain could present that event. We think that that's the kind of thing that we could do moving forward, and we would commit within the $600,000, $25,000 of that towards funding sport tourism activities outside the city of Fredericton in the region. Program inclusion, I mentioned, Dine Around Freddy, Frostival, including the entire region, Taproom Trail. I won't go into that anymore. Experiential tourism development. I think this really is the piece that most requires input from a strategic planning process and understanding what our assets are throughout the region and how we can coordinate and develop new products that will drive the tourism sector and where operators want to be active and communities want to be active. Event consultation. Our office has a tremendous depth in festival and event development, and while we wouldn't fund or develop events on behalf of communities, we would be more than pleased to come in and provide sort of consultative services to help events grow and get established or establish new events. So I just want to touch briefly on the role of the new regional tourism coordinator that we're proposing. That person's role would be to tie the region to the destination marketing organization services, all the services we've discussed, foster and develop relationships with not only tourism operators, but communities, ensure that all the destination products are represented in our marketing and our social media, our calendars, our websites, our guides, and facilitate inclusion in those programs. So really be the primary point of contact for communities and tourism operators throughout the region. In terms of reporting, we would suggest that we report to the RSC directly twice a year, once a year on our plan and once a year on our results. In addition to that, we would obviously report to any committee that you established on economic development and tourism, or come in on individual initiatives as required at any point. I provided some valuations. This isn't really, to be clear, a menu, but it shows you just generally where the money, we would propose the money would be spent on a $600,000 investment in the first year. I won't spend much time on this, but as we move forward, if we were to move forward in this kind of service level agreement, you know, I mentioned that in Fredericton we have, and the Hanwell, we have the tourism accommodation levy. So our hotels are paying a 3.5% tax on, or levy on their sales. They will strongly want to see that there's some sort of level playing field across the region. So over time, we would like to have a discussion about implementing a tourism accommodation levy, which has to be implemented currently under provincial legislation at the municipal level, but implementing that throughout the region and including smaller properties like Airbnbs and campgrounds, which will create a bit more of a level playing field. So in conclusion, you know, we think for $600,000, you're leveraging, you know, New Brunswick's top tourism team, that we can integrate the region, the capital region, as a fully integrated partner in our activities. We can move forward together. We think we provide excellent value for investment. I think starting from the ground up would cost a lot more to get the same level of service. And, you know, you'll have dedicated staff and, you know, that have tremendous enthusiasm for the challenge and a tremendous love for this region, and they'll work their tails off to generate some economic returns to our region as a whole. And with that, I think that concludes the presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions. And I'll just stop the screen share. There we go.
Thank you very much, David. Great presentation. Do any of the members have any questions for David around the package that he just put forward? See, Mayor Powell, you've got your hand up.
David, the hotel fees, would that go to the community or would that go into the tourism?
I think that's something that would have to be discussed, but I think it's reasonable that perhaps communities that pass the levy could use those funds towards their RSC contribution. But I think that's a level of determination that has to be made by the RSC and its constituent communities. I'm not sure I could, sort of determine that on my own.
Okay.
David, if I could just jump in there, I believe in our discussions, that would be a future item that we could bring forward as far as potential harmonization of the hotel accommodation levy within the region. But that would be an issue for another day, and it wouldn't be included in the current proposal. Mayor Wilson-Shee.
Hi, David.
Hi.
There's one comment there that you already touched on, but I'm just going to bring it up again. Tourism service agreement makes reference to an annual CPI inflation-based increase, and that could be problematic if you consider this year's rate is expected to be around 8%. Also, we don't know the annual rate until January of the following year. So that is problematic also with the budget timeline when we need to approve our budget in November. A flat rate of increase may be easier to budget and provide consistency. And I'm glad that you've already mentioned that in your presentation. When you talk about the new staff hire, who will be doing the hiring?
Stacy Russell and myself.
Okay. And also you noted that in the presentation that you could develop new tourism experiences. I think that was in the second year. But how do we know the resulting costs for something that hasn't been yet determined or developed, and who approves those additional costs?
We would do the development. So we don't develop the experience. In other words, we don't develop a new golf course, as an example. But if there were 6 golf courses in the region or 10 golf courses within the region, that we could create a partnership between those golf courses and take a new sort of the product development would be clustering those and going out to the tourism market and saying, we have a great tourism product for golfers, come and visit us, in the way that PEI does with their golf product. So it's not actually building the golf course. That's not our role. Our role is sort of gathering it up. Another example would be, let's say that some of our First Nations wanted to develop, or anybody else wanted to develop a new paddling experience. We would work with them to model the experience and the business. Some of the business counseling would be done by Ignite and the seek and find of funding for their exercise. Ignite's very good at telling people where the money's buried and where grants are available for that kind of thing. We would sort of do a handoff to Ignite. We would focus on coaching them on the elements that are tourism specific, visitors specific. And then when the product is market ready, I use that term market ready, so that they have, an email, a website, a Facebook page, some way that the consumer can contact them, then we would begin marketing and sort of launching and springboarding their product into the marketplace and towards the visitor. So that's our role, is sort of massaging and facilitating and clustering. So that the short answer is that we're not going to spend any more money on that. We're not going to come to you with big, additional asks to develop new product, unless it came as an initiative from the RSC to us as a request to develop something, and then we consider it.
Okay, my last question. Will you be sending anyone out to the different municipalities to see what their strengths and weaknesses are concerning tourism?
Yes, absolutely. So there's 2 sort of tracks on that. One is the hiring of this new regional coordinator who would be your direct contact, both as at a community level and the operators within your community. So that's one track. And then the second is this strategic planning process, where I propose that the RSC within that $600,000 allotment contribute $50,000. We contribute $50,000 at Fredericton Tourism, and we do a harmonized strategy, and there would be consultations throughout the region and communities and operators and visitors, potential visitors on that strategy. So on both levels, we would have lots of contact with your communities.
Okay, and sorry, I do have one more question. The estimated budget. It's for 5 years, but it could change each year?
Well,
or is it locked in for the 5 years?
We were asked to present a budget based on $600,000. I think that, we're all experiencing inflation, and how government deals with that challenge is a challenge for everybody. But I think what it recognizes, and I'm just sort of putting it on the table, that the RSC would have to also recognize this over time, is that would have to increase at modest amounts, to accommodate increased costs. Advertising goes up, staff costs go up, office costs go up. So that could be a manageable set rate, or it could be a CPI based rate, which looked a lot better a couple of years ago when CPI was, sitting at 1%. But that's a negotiated thing that I think can be dealt with in as we get form a formal service level agreement.
Right, and look on the positive side. I mean, that 600,000 could come down over the run of the year. So the second year, it wouldn't have to go up. It could.
Yeah, I'm going to propose that it's stable for 5 years so that we have some predictability. In particular, if we're going to go out and hire a staff person against it, we need some predictability. That would be something I'd feel pretty strongly about, that we have at least a window of time, both that we have stability for hiring staff, and it's very difficult to achieve marketing results going into the market for 1 year. We need to be in the market for multiple years to start to see some results. So it's within the purview of the RSC to set or propose whatever level of funding they want. But once it's set, we would like to see some stability for a period of time, which, can be negotiable.
Right. And I did see in your report, like 5 years. Okay, thank you.
John Williamson, I believe you're next.
Yeah, thank you, Brett. Thank you, David, for the presentation, and enjoyed it. Learned a lot. I do have some questions, however, and I guess my first question is, I think you described your entity, and it may be overstating it as an entity, but you're a division of the city of Fredericton. Mm-hmm. So you are really the city of Fredericton.
We are. We're a bit of a unique entity. We report to our city council as our primary funder, but we also report to the Tourism Accommodation Levy Committee, which are the hotels that contribute the hotel tax. So we sort of have two ownership groups, as it were, and in a sense, what we're proposing here is that we would expand that to 3, and it's our job to keep them all in balance and delivering the services that they want. Fortunately, the services, I think, or the results of the services are economic impact through tourism visitation. And so as long as we're aligned on what the goal is, that I think we can deliver it. But yes, we are a division of the city of Fredericton. We work fairly independently, but we absolutely report to our city council, and we absolutely report to the Tourism Accommodation Levy Committee. What we do is we go to them and we say, last year, your tax, your levy raised this number of dollars. We have a consultation with them about what their priorities are. We then come back to them with marketing programs that meet their priorities, and that's the way we approach it. And we would do something similar with you, and we would blend the priorities of our city council with the RSC and the hotel sector all together. And while that made me a little nervous as we got into it, what I've discovered is that the alignment is as long as we keep everyone focused on economic returns through tourism visitation, that we're able to keep everything aligned and working together.
Yeah, and this may be as much a question for Maurice, if you're still there, Maurice. And it has to do with the MOU, because when we were discussing the economic development piece, it seemed in the end that governance and I guess involvement, direction, and guidance reporting to the RSC was as much going to be through an MOU. And so in this case, the MOU would be technically with the city. Is that correct?
with the city or the department, but yes, I think in principle, that's correct. It would be between the RSC and either the city of Fredericton or it would be the tourism department of the city of Fredericton.
Okay, and so then the governance aspects of this and the, I guess, involvement of the RSC and its members would be through some process in perhaps an advisory committee or on, I'm just trying to get a better sense of how this would work and sort of trying to draw parallels with the economic development and perhaps an MOU with Ignite.
Well, yeah, we would certainly, assuming, again, I don't want to assume, but if we were to proceed and agree to move forward with Tourism Fredericton as the delivery agent for tourism promotion across the region, then we would sit down, Brett and I would sit down with Dave and his team, and we would start to work on an MOU or a service level agreement or a combination of both that would cover off all of the things, legalese that you'd normally have. And I'm not being pejorative, but obviously those things are needed. But in addition to that, we'd identify, how is the reporting going to work? What's the governance structure that's in place? What kind of committee should we establish, et cetera, et cetera. So all of those things would end up being covered in an MOU in the same manner as they would be covered in an MOU with Ignite.
Okay, and just a follow-up and I guess wondering whether the city of Fredericton, I'm just a little puzzled with the exclusion of the city from the tax assessment being shared by the, I'll rephrase that, the costs associated with this tourism promotion that will be incurred by the RSC and the city of Fredericton is not being part of it. It gets a little bit fuzzy. And I'm just going to raise it as a possible issue with your MOU and trying to be consistent with how you're treating the city as a member of the region RSC, regional RSC.
I think that's a very, very good question, and I'll tell you quite candidly, the backdrop. As Brett had alluded to, we've gone to a working group, which is all of the CAOs and clerks from within the region who are interested and willing to participate on that working group committee. So we've taken these presentations to that group. We've taken it to an advisory committee, which is a smaller group of elected officials, and well in advance of going to those committees, we were trying to sort out what's the best way to approach the delivery of these services. We landed on Ignite as being a logical one for economic development. And we began discussions with the city of Fredericton because it seemed logical that in terms of an RDMO, there really is nothing better, certainly in the capital region, than Tourism Fredericton. So we began a discussion with the city of Fredericton. They made it clear to us that they were already investing significant amounts of money. And then on top of that, you've got the tourism accommodation levy. So, that funding is the magnitude of a couple of $1 million. City of Fredericton's contribution to that is like $1.5 million. So we felt that's a significant amount of money. And so, do we say, okay, we're going to go for $1.4 million in total. And we're going to say, okay, Fredericton, you've got to give your 820,000 on top of the 1.5 that you're already putting in, and we'll get the other 600,000 from the other entities. That approach really didn't seem to be fair to us. And so we said, okay, let's assume that the 1.5 million is well above what the city of Fredericton's contribution would be if we did it on a $1.4 million budget. So we said, okay, their contribution is already there. They're putting in 2.5 times. They're putting in a significant amount, almost twice as much as they would if we were to use the 1.4 million and say 57% of that is 800,000. So we took for granted that the 1.5 million was representative enough of their investment into a $1.4 million agreement and said, let's go get the 600,000, which is the remaining 43% on the tax base from 1.4 million. And then we end up with 1.4 million for economic development, and we end up with over $2 million for tourism. And if you take the pedal agreement, you end up with, ironically, 2.1 million for economic development and over 2 million for tourism on behalf of the entities in the Regional Service Commission. So that was, and I'm just laying out, that was exactly how we came up with what we came up with, John.
Yeah. And it's not that I'm suggesting that it doesn't make sense. My concern would be the technicalities of not running at least a portion of the city's contribution through the RSC agreement as a member of the Regional Service Commission and required to pay for a mandated service. So it's something that I would just raise as for consideration when you're working out the finances of it.
Okay, and we will be consulting a lawyer, obviously, before any MOU comes back to the board. So it may be something that we get some guidance on from legal counsel as well. But it's a good point. Thank you for raising it, John.
Okay.
Mayor McFarland, I believe you're next. Well, you're on mute, Jeff.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thanks for your presentation, Dave. One of the things, back to what John said, what I liked about the presentation by Ignite was the creation of an oversight committee and advisory group, and then the transformation of their board eventually to represent the whole entire entity. I would like to see something like that designed within our tourism. So it's not just run all by the city of Fredericton, that we eventually start moving towards collaborating with everyone, allowing everyone to apply for the jobs, create more of a regional tourism board and group. The second question would be in terms of services. It's going to be 3 years before this gets rolled out. Are we going to look at a 3-year gradual increase of the 28,000? Like for us, it's 28,900. So the first year, it's only 10,000, and gradually get there as services grow till we see a return on our investment. And then the second one's that you guys weren't going to get involved in community events like music fests and such. But then also you stated that in the sport and tourism, you gave Crab Mountain $25,000. I'm a little unclear on that aspect of helping to fund and create different events.
So on the event side, we just don't think it's within our capacity to fund events in every community. And I think that, so we've zeroed out those contributions from the city of Fredericton into the bill. As I stated, when you include those, our contribution to tourism and event services in Fredericton is $3 million. So we zeroed all that out in our activity. I think it would really be outside of our ability to deliver effectively to start thinking that we would start building festivals in every community. Now, we would consult on festivals and communities. The difference with sport tourism is it's a little more manageable. We deal with two types of sport tourism. One is the types of events that we try to convince to come and bring their event here. So in other words, in Fredericton this week, we're hosting the under-19 women's softball fast pitch softball championship. So we went out and made a bid for that event along with the sports organization. The second type of event that we do is we encourage the development of homegrown events and using facilities throughout the city of Fredericton. And that could expand in terms of using facilities beyond the city of Fredericton as the event organizer wants. But there's always an event organizer, it's not us, that is driving the bus and setting their demands for what they want. In the case of Crab Mountain, they came to us and said, we would like you to contribute to the Junior Moguls Championships. And because we saw a benefit to hotel stays and other economic investment, we agreed to that and made a $12,000 contribution, $12,000, I think it was $12,500 towards that event. So they're two markets that operate differently. The festival market is very community driven, and the sport market also is to some degree, but less so. And it has an organizational structure through the sports organizations, so it's manageable.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, Mayor Rogers, you have a question. Oh, Kate, you're muted.
I was just saying, you might have noticed I was smiling, Jeff, when you asked the sport tourism question, because it's very consistent with the kinds of questions that we've even asked around the council table, because it is treated uniquely from sort of, say, our cultural festivals, where, you know, there was a determination made. I think there was enough of an economic return or a variety of reasons why the sport tourism dollar would come out of a tourism budget, whereas our festivals, so any festivals that you would see in Fredericton, it doesn't come out of the tourism. They're grants that the city of Fredericton gives through our community grant program. So it's above and beyond. So it's not like this tourism department would fund festivals in Fredericton and not in other parts of the region. Rather, our municipality would continue to support those festivals through the community grant program. So it probably is just a little bit of, you know, I think we're all sort of saying, oh gosh, we fund this regional tourism entity, and then what about the money that we're spending to incite certain types of activities in our municipalities and communities beyond that? But the city of Fredericton does that as well, so we would be right there with you. I guess I was going to speak to a couple of things. One, there's been discussion about how Ignite talked about having an advisory committee to ensure regional representation versus the approach that the tourism, the regional tourism would take. And I think the distinction is that Ignite's a nonprofit organization operated by a board that would set up this subcommittee. That what was in this proposal that Dave presented is that there would be a dedicated staff person, so a staff resource that would ensure regionality and regional collaboration. So to me, that's a different type. It's a different way for the region to have a voice. One would be through the advisory committee. One would be through staff. Nevertheless, I would still think there would be an opportunity to have a working group, a regional working group that advises. But it's a different. The governance models are very different, just in the way that just in how they operate. One is a nonprofit organization. One is a division that exists within a municipality. Doesn't mean it only works through the municipality, as Dave showed. You know, we have the tourism, the levy, and that group. But nevertheless, I think it does impact the type of governance model that can be in place and how it is that we can ensure a regional voice. So we shouldn't think of them as being, they're different types of entities. So they'll have to be that will just need to be addressed in a slightly different way as a result. Can get the same outcome, but we should think about it differently.
Yes, that's well said, Mayor Kate. And what we're proposing is the governance over the $600,000 in the service level agreement would be governed by the RSC or its designated committee. We would come and report directly to the committee in terms of governing the $600,000 investment.
Are there any other questions for Dave? See, we have 5 more minutes left in the allotted time. Doesn't look like it, Mr. Chair. John, you're on mute. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well,
I see two.
I thought you were just gonna pull the plug on questions. So you opened a door of, you got 2 or 3 minutes or 5 minutes. Anyway, on the last comment, and I don't want to belabor the point, but when Dave says that it's the $600,000 that the RSC would have input into, again, I'm going back to the, I'm not sure how the relationship between the RSC and the city and the city's contribution should be dealt with under the MOU. It seems to me problematic that the city is not, in a sense, part of the regional tourism strategy.
I think that's to be worked out. You know, I think the way that the presentation, I'll just talk about the way I structured the presentation. It was to explain and sort of break out the money, how the money flows, and whether, you know, that would be a further negotiation in the service level agreement, as Maurice has said. How Fredericton contributes within the regional tax structure would have to be determined. I'm just talking about my presentation was just to break out so you sort of could see where the money was coming from, as it were.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sean. And I believe I saw Mayor Powell. Did you have a question?
Oh, well, I did have just a comment. Hopefully the new hiring will be someone within the region, not just from Fredericton.
Well, the person we look, our intention would be to hire the very best person we think can do the very best job. And like any other hire that we do, you know, we just hire the best person for the job that applies.
No, I understand that, but someone in the region can apply.
Absolutely.
Okay, no, perfect.
And I'm
So
sorry.
that job posting won't be just internal to the city of Fredericton. It'll be a regional job posting. And then my other question, the only other scary part of it is the power that the hotels have over the decision making and the lack of oversight from the RSC. Right? They contribute and bring a lot of power into the game, and it would be nice to make sure that you know, we have a regional oversight and not just from the large conglomerate base centered right out of Fredericton.
Yeah, we found that, you know, that was a concern of mine as well, that we were going to be run as we entered into the whole, and we're still adapting to it, quite frankly, to the whole tourism accommodation levy environment. It's a seismic shift for the way that we do business. And I was concerned that exactly that the hotels would try to run us, and I was concerned that we would be run by multinationals outside of our region. It hasn't turned out that way. They're very much in line with our advice on how to generate tourism revenue, and we've found that the activity has been very complementary.
Yeah, my concern is we're a small community, right? 40 minutes outside of Fredericton. You know, Airbnbs, small campgrounds. That's the place, right? People like to come for that peace and quiet, and also for the price point too. And we enter into an MOU with yourselves, and all of a sudden they start pushing back. You already alluded to it at the beginning. That you know, we'll be forced into creating a tax levy here in a region that most people won't be in favor of.
Well, that's a future discussion about harmonizing, but you know, there is a contribution, and you know, that $600,000 was during the pandemic. That could be that contribution could climb. But what I would say is that we're going to be looking to expand the type of visitor that we want, not just to hotels, but to campgrounds, to Airbnbs, and they're different consumers, and we speak to them differently. So it's not, they're not in conflict. At the end of the day, we all benefit when we can attract the right consumer to the right tourism operator.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further questions, I'd like to thank you, Dave, for your presentation. It was very informative and enjoyable to listen to, and there was lots of good questions came out of it. The same with your presentation, Larry. Lots of questions came out of it. So now we're going on to our next step, which is staff report. So we'll say good night to both you folks and talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Get well, Dave.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. And before I get going on my staff report, my apologies for directing. Going to leading those questions. I absolutely force of habit after the working group and advisory committee meetings that we've had, and I do apologize. So
Not a problem after the day I've had. That was just perfect. Thank you.
Give you a break. So I'll just touch on the high notes on the staff report. It's essentially a summary of the with a bit of background on these two mandates and how they've flowed through the working group and the advisory committee. Obviously covering the mandated services, and these are the big ones. As I noted earlier, they would account for combined approximately 3/4 of the estimated costs of all the new mandated services that we're expected to have in place before 2023. So again, both of these moved through both of those groups separately. The first was tourism, and that was about a month and a half ago. The second was economic development. That was just last week. And the group felt that it would be appropriate, given the magnitude of the potential cost, to forward this onto the board for a full presentation and consideration. Now, Maurice had mentioned this earlier. I'll reiterate it. You know, the expenses associated with both of these services are obviously fairly significant, but it could also be viewed, and I think rightfully so, not so much as costs associated with them, but investments. Obviously, they would, you know, this world is a competitive one. I think it's important for context to note that the other regions are also spending money in these areas, and there's a finite amount of businesses and tourists to go around. So it's therefore it's important to really have a robust regional strategy in place and approach to both of these mandates. Now, as far as the costs go, again, as noted previously, the expected cost for economic development is total 1.44 million in 2023. Tourism, we've got that broken out. Fredericton has been excluded for the rest of the region that doesn't currently have tourism promotion in place. The cost would be 620,000. And again, this would be complementary to the existing investment that Fredericton already puts into tourism of 1.5 million. And again, I'm excluding the hotel accommodation levy in that number. But obviously that 1.5 million, the rationale for excluding them in this exercise would be that 1.5 million totals roughly double what their calculated contribution would be using the formula that we've applied for the regional program. Now, to put it differently, in terms of tax rate, because that's obviously important as well. The impact for each of these programs is approximately 0.94 cents on the mill rate. So that's for each one of them. That would total 0.0188 cents on the mill rate. I suspect that will account for about 75% of the total cost of all of these mandates. We've discussed that at the working group and advisory committee level, but we suspect that we're fairly comfortable that the total cost of the mandates combined, that would be community development, economic development and tourism, rural or regional transportation, and the public safety committee, combined would come in under 3 cents total on the mill rate. Now the province, and this is the big item to note. The province has really only given us 3 options on how to proceed with the implementation of these mandated services. The first is that we can do what we've put to the board this evening and choose an outside service provider to provide those services. The second option would be to do it in-house, which in this case would mean establishing our own economic development agency and our own tourism promotion division. Obviously, there would be some significant costs associated with that particular option. The third would be that the board may choose to implement a hybrid approach of the two. And I'm not sure that's particularly appealing either. Because this is a matter of policy, there is no staff recommendation included in my report, but I do put that out there. Obviously, the high points are that we've only been given 3 options on how to execute in this case. I'd be happy to take questions on the report, and but perhaps before we move to discussion, I could hand it over to Maurice if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, thank you, Brett. I guess the only thing I would add is that, and I was thinking of covering much of what you've covered, so thanks for addressing those points, Brett. But I guess the only thing I would add is I think one of the advantages of Ignite and comparatively one of the advantages of Tourism Fredericton is both delivery models come with additional money. In the case of Ignite, they have got already a confirmation from Post-Secondary Education, Training and Labor that they have funding for a 10-year agreement. The way that's going to work, so you know, is that PEDAL will have an agreement in place with the RSC, and if Ignite is selected as the delivery agency, then the RSC would have an agreement in place with Ignite and would be responsible for ensuring that there's accountability and proper reporting, both for the RSC dollars and as well the PEDAL dollars. So what we do is we take effectively a $1.4 million investment in economic development, should we proceed with the proposal that's before you, and that gets topped up to over $2 million a year in the first year, and then the PEDAL money has a bonus clause, and it moves up in subsequent years. So that's on that side. And on the tourism side, we look at a destination marketing organization that's already in place, that's already had significant success, and as well comes with it a significant amount of dollars to the table. So we have the $1.5 million that's there from the city of Fredericton. We can leverage that. We can leverage the tourist accommodation dollars that are being collected at the present time, and we can add some of our Regional Service Commission money to that. And again, as I said earlier, have a budget for tourism promotion across the region that's in excess of $2 million, while it's really costing 2/3 of that to the Regional Service Commission. So I think what we have before us are two very logical and legitimate proposals. I know that at the working group meeting and at the advisory committee meeting, there were concerns about the reporting and the accountability for Ignite. I don't think anyone was really questioning their ability to do quality work. And I think that's underscored by the David Campbell report that we circulated last week. And I think, as I said earlier, I'd like to form a little committee to ensure that we get it right when we put together the MOU for Ignite, to ensure that we have the accountability mechanisms in there and the governance mechanisms that were discussed tonight and that we all feel are important to incorporate in any agreement that we would strike with Ignite if we choose to go in that direction. And I would be open to the idea as well, if there was interest from any of the entities to have representation on a small group that could work on the MOU with Tourism Fredericton. I would be open to that notion as well, because frankly, more brain power is always welcome, particularly when we're trying to strike an arrangement that's going to work for a number of different entities across the entire region. So with that, we'll open it up to questions, and just ask anyone and everyone, if you're interested, please just signal with your hand, and we'll move one after the other. So do you want me to chair this, Brett? I can do so if you'd like. And
I'm going to leave it to John.
Okay.
Again, my apologies for doing that
John.
earlier, but it's all yours.
Chair, it's all yours.
No problem at all. Mike Chamberlain, you have a question.
Yes, I had a comment and a question. I totally agree with Maurice that, you know, if we're going to be mandated to do this, you know, Ignite and Tourism Fredericton are a perfect choice. I just don't see any reason to start something new. It's just going to cost more money, and it's duplication and everything else. So that was my comment. My question is, I'm a little confused, Brett, with the with your comment that it's going to be 3 cents, but then you're saying that's only 75%. Are you saying that this total cost of all those things we're doing is going to be about around 4 cents or 3 cents?
No, Director Chamberlain, what I was trying to imply there, I'm comfortable that the total cost of all the mandates is calculated, and that would be dependent if we move forward with the proposals that you saw this evening, would come in under 3 cents on the mill rate region-wide. I don't see a scenario where it would even approach 4 cents. In fact, I suspect, and I'm trying to be conservative because I don't want to overpromise and under-deliver, but I suspect it's going to be significantly below 3 cents, but 3 cents would be absolutely a conservative estimate.
Thank you, Brett.
You're welcome.
Mayor Jeff, do you have a question?
Yeah, first comment too, I believe in both proposals. Ignite has had a regional envelope for a long time, and we've worked with them on many occasions. The only one would be I'd like to see an MOU with the city of Fredericton and some sort of advisory group associated with it, where they are solely city staff, city based, and the $1.5 million is basically Fredericton centered. They do reach out a little bit, but it has been in years past. We've not received any handouts or invites to collaborate. So just moving forward, it would be nice to make sure that we have some sort of advisory group to make sure that there will be some mandates regionally.
Thank you. Mayor Wilson Shee.
Thank you, John. The two presentations were great, and we know what we're going to pay for those. However, there's no talk about recreation and the culture facilities. So, like, I'd like to see the big picture before I go starting on voting on little things. I'd hate to vote on this and have my council say, yes, vote on both of these. And then the recreation comes in at a really high cost. So that's one of my concerns. I like to see everything, the big picture, before New Maryland goes and votes on everything. And I think that's very important. And the other thing we have to talk about, and it concerns the budget, is the staff with the hiring of the CEO in September. And the ED goes until the agreement till December 31st. So we have to look at, are we going to keep the ED on plus with the CEO? Or are we going to eliminate the ED's position? We haven't discussed that, and that has to be discussed before the budget comes due. And also, I don't know, like, has it gone out? Has there been interviews? Like, was that clause in there that they'd be working, maybe without an ED? I have no idea what took place there. So Maurice, has that gone out for people to apply?
Oh, yes. No, for sure. And I was going to kind of do an update after we're done on various other elements of the reform as it relates to RSCs, but I'll comment on your question at the moment. Yes, there have been KBRS, Knightsbridge, Robertson Surrett, a prominent headhunting firm, probably the biggest in Atlantic Canada, was engaged by the province. They've gone through a very, very exhaustive process. They've run ads in social media, traditional media. They've gone into their own bank of potential candidates. They've come up with a really, really strong list of candidates for all of the regions, all the RSCs. We formed a small committee that did interviews with, we did a number of interviews virtually with a number of possible candidates for both 11 and 12, RSCs 11 and 12. Then we whittled it down to 2 candidates for each RSC, and we've identified through that interview committee one candidate that we felt was the strongest in each of RSC 11 and 12, and they're currently in the process now, KBRS is, of verifying references and so on. Ultimately, the decision is not made by me or by us. The decision on who gets hired ultimately is made by the minister, but obviously the interview committee, which consisted of John Bigger, Mike Chamberlain, and was Mike, John Bigger, and Stephen Hart. Who else was there with us, John? I forget.
It was Derek Pleadwell.
It was Derek Pleadwell. Sorry, Mike, and sorry, Derek. I don't really need to apologize to Derek. He's a friend, so haha. But anyway, it was the three of us. That's correct. It was John Bigger, it was Derek Pleadwell, and Stephen Hart. And we interviewed two candidates, and we came up with one that unanimously we felt was the strongest one. And they're now checking references on that person. Back to your question about whether the ED position will be maintained. A decision has not been made on that and probably won't be made on that for some time. My sense would be that in the larger RSCs, like that exist in the St. John area, the Moncton area, and in the Capital Region, there may be an inclination to want to keep the executive director, although I don't know that for a fact. I'm just speculating. I do know that we likely will, in our budget, include the position of the CEO and as well include the position of the ED unless a decision gets made beforehand to eliminate that ED position. But ultimately, that decision will probably only be made after some time. And so my suspicion is that we will budget for the ED position and as well for the CEO position. And to your concern about costs, the one area that Brett should have included in the costing that we've done is the cost for the CEO position. So keeping the ED position, keeping the CEO position still causes us to be well under 3 cents on the mill rate. And the final comment I would make is insofar as the infrastructure cost sharing, that's going to be on an individual project basis, and it can't be determined now. It could be some time before we determine that. And frankly, you know, as I mentioned to you on our call today, we're running late on developing our budget. Our budget's supposed to be in first draft form by tomorrow, and it's not, and it's far from there. It's just not expected that we will be able to budget in the RSC budget for the cost sharing component of the services that are going to be delivered by the RSCs. They will come after, and they'll be taken to the board, and the board will have to make decisions on those. So the under 3 cents that Brett was referring to was for all of the services other than regional cost sharing on infrastructure projects.
Okay, and that does include keeping the ED with the new position of the CEO, correct?
Well, yeah, that's my sense.
For now.
My sense is that we will likely include the ED position along with the CEO. What I'm hearing from others and from the province is that in some of the smaller RSCs, they may not necessarily need both a CEO and an executive director. But in an organization like the Capital Region RSC, which has a number of responsibilities at the present time, has a number of employees carrying out those responsibilities, and now we're going to add a whole host of other responsibilities on the RSC, the RSC may decide that, and the new CEO will have a hand in making a recommendation to the board one way or the other as to whether that position should be maintained. But we'll have to wait and see till that person gets in place, and that person's supposed to be in place on September 1st.
Right. Are we being called the Capital Region Service Commission 11, or are we still going with Regional Service Commission 11?
It's the Capital Region Service Commission. The numbers are
Okay.
being dropped, yeah.
Because I heard that a lot in the presentations tonight. Do you, Maurice, as a facilitator and our minister, have the authority to approve the budget regardless of how the board votes?
I don't have any measure of approval. I can recommend, but at the end of the day, the board can recommend, I can recommend, but ultimately the decision is in the hands of the ministry, yes.
So my question was, if the board, say the first time around, they vote no for the budget, which has happened before, and the minister gets hold of that, he can actually pass that budget without our approval, right?
Well, yes, but I don't know that it's as clear cut as that, Mirshi. I think we are encouraged strongly as facilitators to try and achieve a degree of consensus and it is an exercise where we're aiming to be more collaborative and cooperative and working together. And so, the last thing we want to be doing is imposing anything on elected officials that we can avoid, frankly. And in this instance, part of the reason we're having the kind of discussion that we're having tonight. It's it's a long meeting, but we have to discuss it. We have to hear all of the viewpoints. We have to try and address them. If there are issues that we can't address, then we have to go back and try and get the answers to that. And that's what happened, frankly, at the working group and advisory committee. There were a number of questions that we didn't have the answers to at our fingertips. We went back and we did some homework and we got that material in your hands. And I think we're having a more constructive discussion as a result of that. So, but
Yes.
they're all good questions, Mirshi.
Yes. Did you happen to look into my question earlier today when we talked on the phone about a cap on the
I
LSDs?
haven't had a chance. I haven't had a
Okay.
chance. I'm sorry, but I will.
Okay,
I
because
will.
I'd be interested. And my last comment, this is for you, Brett.
Yes.
We had a phone conversation, if you recall, after one of our advisory meetings, and I asked you the cost of concerned tourism. So you called me up and you told me, and we hung up and I said, well, that's not bad. Then you called right back. You said, I made a mistake and had a few more zeros. Can I hold you to that cost that you quoted me?
The first one or the second one?
Yeah.
Well, the second one, because it's still cheaper, a lot cheaper than what comes out on the paperwork.
Now, and Judy, and I don't want to, I don't want to. I take full responsibility for that, but that was a miscommunication in the numbers that were provided to me.
Absolutely, but I had to throw that in there.
You can have full confidence in my math abilities, but it appears so. Obviously the province as a whole is in flux, and the department is I think working as hard as they can, but we've had some challenges as far as receiving tax-based numbers with the updated entities, all of those things. And so I think we're very close to the hole. We might not be in the, to use a golf analogy, we're very close. It's an unusual year, to be sure.
Thank you, Brett. I just had to bring up that comment.
Oh, no,
Thank
listen,
you.
no problem. You're welcome.
John? Do you have a question?
So Maurice had made a suggestion. First of all, I support pursuing arrangements with or trying to make arrangements with both Ignite and the city of Fredericton for tourism. So the sort of devil's in the details, and so those MOUs are going to be fundamentally important. So Maurice had suggested some advisory committee, and Maurice, I'm not sure. I thinking you were suggesting an advisory committee of the board, and if so, I think that might be a very good way to proceed, and I'd be prepared to support a committee or two committees perhaps of the board to work towards MOUs and bringing those back to the board for approval or discussion, at least.
Well, to be honest with you, I guess I was leaning more towards perhaps the CAOs representing the communities that have had an existing relationship with Ignite, because part of what we heard at the last meeting was concerns over, they've done good work, but they haven't maybe been as accountable as they could be. They haven't been reporting maybe as much on a regular basis as they should. So I was thinking initially that it would be the people who were at the operational level within those communities, Fredericton, Oromocto, and New Maryland, that could form part of a working group with Brett and I to work through exactly what should be the content of the annexes in the MOU. I'm not precluding the idea of involving or doing it with members of this board, but those MOUs would ultimately come to this board. By the way,
that's what I was assuming, and I guess that's why I was interpreting your reference to a committee to be a committee of the board as opposed to, as you just described it.
Yeah. We would take it to the advisory committee for sure, John,
Okay.
which is a representative sample of the board. So the working group that I'm proposing would be probably a smaller iteration of our working group for the region, which is really clerks and CAOs from every entity that has one. And then that would feed up through the advisory committee, which is elected officials. And then from there would go to the full board.
Okay, so is that something that would require a motion, John?
I mean, we could add it to a motion if there's a desire tonight to make a motion about moving forward on both proposals as they've been presented. We could add the qualifier with each of the proposals that there be the establishment of a whatever we want to call it to develop and the MOUs and bring them back to the board for a final green light.
Through the working group, I think you said. So they wouldn't come, they'd come through the advisory committee or the working group that's already in place.
Start with the smaller version of the working group that would develop the basic draft MOU. That draft MOU would go to the advisory committee, which is elected officials.
Okay.
Assuming we get a green light there, it comes to the full board for a, that's how I would envisage it at least.
Okay. And to me, that makes sense. It's practical and ultimately gives the board something with some meat on it, so to speak, some detail that it can actually ultimately make a decision on one way or the other. So, John, does that require anything from the board at this point? Perhaps an understanding that that's how the board wants to proceed, assuming they do.
Well, I think we need a motion of the board to proceed with engaging Ignite and the City of Fredericton Tourism Department. That would have to happen.
Well, wouldn't the motion simply be that we would proceed as Maurice has described it?
But exactly, but that would be part and parcel of that. If we were going to use the, as Maurice described it, then we'd have to move along to say that we were going to get into a relationship with both Ignite and the City of Fredericton on tourism and economic development, right?
Yeah.
So don't you think we should wait until the board members take it back to their council?
John has the floor. John.
Sorry.
Okay, no, I defer to Judy.
Thank you, John.
Hey,
I
Judy.
think it's too premature tonight. We haven't even taken it back to our councils for discussion.
And that was the kind of the feeling of the advisory committee, that it would become for discussion tonight. And then when information was presented to each of the separate councils and people, mayors and representatives were comfortable, then it would come to the board for a motion to engage Ignite and the City of Fredericton. At that point in time, if we were going to do that, then we have to develop the MOU. I'm just not sure where the MOU comes into place. If it's before we engage the city and Ignite, or we do the MOU, and if we get successful an agreement on those, then we do the motion to engage.
What we've done
you would
elsewhere.
engage, do the MOU afterwards, because Marie said we're going to get feedback from a lawyer, or we're going to spend money on a lawyer, and not before we get the consensus of people around the board.
Mr. Chair, if I may, in other jurisdictions, the way it's working is that they're deciding at the board level that they're prepared to proceed with a service deliverer, some organization or some manner in which the service is going to be delivered. And then the MOU is being developed afterwards and brought to the board, ultimately to the board through the process that John was describing and that I was concurring with, through a working group advisory committee and up to the board for a final okay, so that it covers and addresses any concerns that the board may have on governance and accountability and so on.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Kate, you had a question.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, but I have to bring up a procedural matter.
Okay.
Section 6.93 says that we have to automatically adjourn at 9 unless 2/3 of the members present vote to continue.
Thank you for that. I didn't realize the time. Sorry. So you heard Kelly's comments. What's the pleasure of the board? Continue, or do you want to adjourn the meeting? Moved by Mayor Kate, your microphone's off.
I muted it again. I said, I'll move to continue.
I'll second
I
it.
second it.
Do I have a seconder?
Rachel.
All those in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? Motion is carried. Continue on. Thanks. Did you get that, Kelly, the mover and seconder? Or Kelly, sorry. Okay, Mayor Kate. You had a
Yes,
question.
thank you. Thanks, John. So I guess I'll just follow up on the conversation that's happening right now. So if I'm understanding you correctly, Maurice, and what I think we would need to do, we could make a motion to proceed to investigation, just, you know, it's sort of this, so I'm seeing John nod. So I think that that's
Yep.
what we're saying. We would make a motion to proceed to work out the MOUs or the SLA, and maybe it's just even the MOUs at this stage through the working group, through the advisory group. That comes back here, and then prior to us voting on that, then we would have an opportunity to confer with our councils. And but I think that there seems to be a general willingness to move forward to the next step with these two organizations, and I would concur. I'm comfortable with the City of Fredericton Tourism, I guess, because I know the work. I know the people and the work that they do. They're really excellent. I can attest to that, and they're regionally minded. I know that group of folks, they have just been waiting to be able to go out into the region, because it enhances all of our products to work together. The City of Fredericton product is enhanced by being able to help develop products in the rest of the region. And I know that they really are looking forward to doing that work. And Dave has given thought to it. And I'm certain that we can work out all the concerns that have been raised, certain that we can work out. But it's an existing entity that the back office, it always makes me nervous creating anything new. I mean, that's a division that's housed all the back end, like HR. When you think of all the supports, back end office supports that go towards supporting a staff, they're already in place. So why would we ever look at wanting to create something new that would cost us so much more than the price tag that's being put in front of all of us? So that is one. The second is Ignite, again, an established entity. Look, I'm the first to say we haven't always been happy with reporting, accountability, even communications, but I would never say that the work isn't good. Like they do good work. And as evidenced by the report written by David Campbell, I don't know how many of you know or have worked with David in the past, but I have quite extensively in different ways. Long before I even came to the city. He does excellent work. He's really a consummate professional in economic development. And I realized that report was done for Ignite, but the fact that he speaks really so highly of the organization gives me a lot of confidence. So I'm certain that we would get a very good product through Ignite. But really, as all of you have pointed out, the devil is going to be in the detail. I think that we will need to put together a really tight service level agreement to ensure the reporting and the level of accountability, how the governance works. I think that we'll have to be really architects in that as well. We'll have to make sure that we all feel comfortable that our voices are being represented. But I think that they're proven entities. And so why we're fortunate in our region that we have these proven entities that we can work with and that we could tailor to really create some really good regional efforts. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Mike Chamberlain, please.
Yes, thank you. Just a comment. I'm a little disappointed with the process in selecting a CEO. I brought this up before at the committee, but I see our ED Oversight Committee was not involved in this whatsoever. And I'm just wondering what others might think about this, that it should involve more people, I think, in these interviews, but maybe I'm wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. John Williamson, please.
Mindful of the time and agreeing with what Mayor Rogers just said. I don't know whether she's prepared to make the motion. If she were, I'd second it, or vice versa. But I think to, I guess, allay Judy's concerns about having the opportunity to consult with each entity's councils, I would want to make sure that was part of the motion, so that it wouldn't simply come to the board for a vote without that opportunity. So Mayor Rogers.
Thanks, John. But to be honest, because the city of Fredericton, is
yes,
one of
okay.
I think I'd feel more comfortable if someone else did. It looks like a little bit of self-interest, and I don't want it. It isn't, and I
No,
don't want it to come across that way. So I'd be more comfortable.
I'm prepared to make the motion as you articulated it.
Mr. Chair, it's Maurice here. Can I just, I think I have a suggestion that'll break this logjam. I appreciate that one or maybe several of you are interested in going back to councils and reporting in that, you know, this is what we're looking at doing. And so I get all of that. You know, we're starting to get up against a wall here. As I mentioned, the budget needs to be approved really by tomorrow, and we're nowhere near that. So this has to be in place by January 1st. And what I was fearful of a few months ago is starting to come into play. The calendar is starting to shrink on us. So I would advance this suggestion. I would advance the suggestion that we reconvene in 2 weeks, at which time we make a definitive decision on moving forward or not with the 2 proposals that were presented today. And immediately after we make that decision, if we make the decision to move forward with those 2 proposals at that time, hopefully that will give time for folks to go back and consult to the extent they need to with councils. We get together, we hopefully move forward with the 2 proposals, because I've heard quite a number of you come and make comments to the effect that you like the 2 proposals. We agree to move forward on the proposals, subject to a final green light approval by the board on an MOU for each of the 2 projects. That allows us to get the consultation work that some are suggesting needs to happen before there's an approval at this level. And then it also allows us the opportunity to ensure that we can have a definitive delivery process in place and agreed upon within 2 weeks from now, by the 10th of August, let's say. And then from there, the job comes back to Brett and I and the formation of these 2 individual little working groups to ensure that we can put forward MOUs in the course of the coming weeks that are going to be acceptable, A, to the advisory committee, and B, to ultimately to the board.
Any objections to that idea? Bob?
None. No, I like that idea. I like that idea. It gives us a chance to go back to our council and then we can come back in 2 weeks and have an answer.
Yeah, it's a good idea as well.
Yeah, same here. I think it's a great idea.
I agree.
Do you have a question? Excuse me.
John, I'm just concerned that we're going with another Wednesday, and it's just fortunate that we don't have a CIC that night. Could we switch it to Tuesday the 9th to be consistent on a Tuesday night, or?
Yeah, I just threw out 2 weeks
Yeah,
from
but
today.
does the
because I
Tuesday
assumed 2
night
weeks later.
interfere with anyone else's council meetings?
And Tuesday works better for me.
Okay, Tuesday, the 9th of August, we'll reconvene. You'll have a chance to talk to your councils or groups and explain to them that we have 3 options. The option that seems to be the favorable one around the board is that we engage Ignite and the City of Fredericton Tourism Department to deliver the tourism and the economic development. That's basically the option, or I think that's where we come to. I've got a
that's one of the options.
paper here with everybody's comments.
The other option is to do it internally, and the other option is to do a hybrid. So there's 3 options.
Well, there are 3 options, but the majority of the people around the table tonight said they liked the 2 presentations that we were given.
Yep.
I guess that's the point I'm making.
So John,
Okay.
John, is that a consensus then, and we don't need a motion? I'm happy with whichever way you would prefer to go.
Well, that's what I would say. It's consensus, and we don't. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks and then make the decision then.
Okay. I'm happy with that, comfortable with that.
Okay, if there's nothing else, update on government reform. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that, Maurice?
Geez, I'm out of wind, out of breath. I don't know that there's a great deal to add. We've touched on economic development enough. We've touched on tourism. We have a signed agreement with ESIC on community development. Brett has been working hard at a dialogue with urban rural rides. I think we've got an estimate as to what kind of cost might be involved with that, although that still needs to be finalized. But it's actually quite a reasonable estimate initial estimate that we've received on extending urban rural rides to cover the entire region. The Public Safety Committee, there's work that needs to be done on that, but that can easily be done over the coming weeks by Brett and his team. I guess that's about it. Am I missing anything, Brett? Any other update that you think it's important to let people know about? We've touched on the CEO, so I think we should be okay on that. Anything else, Brett, that you can think of?
No, I think, we've had we've had a pretty thorough meeting, I think, at this point, and no, we're making good progress. But obviously, if we can get these two mandates that we were discussing this evening out of the way, we've got the lion's share of it done. I think that's a fair statement.
That's good. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time tonight to meet and discuss this. I think it was important that we did have this long discussion on it. If they're the two most, I guess, as Brett described them, the most costly and really, in my opinion, the two most important things that we require in the region. So given a couple of hours, I don't think it was a waste of time in any stretch of the imagination. And we'll come back in a couple of weeks and get that sorted and move on. So thank you all for that. And I would now ask for a motion to adjourn, please.
I second it.
Moved by Stephen Sharp, second by Judy Wilson-Shee. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, folks.
Thank
Thank you very much.
Night.
Have a good
Night, everybody.
everyone.
Night all.
Drive safe.